Chapter 273. As the song and dance continued, the leaves on the crown flew out one by one, merged into the hovering lightning, and turned into a withered yellow color. The 4 petals on the rose that had disappeared strangely grew back, and the tender flower bloomed again in the lightning. Peloponnes really had a trick that she was best at, and she used it at the last moment. As the rose bloomed again, the black lightning gradually retracted, and the goddess also disappeared in the center of the vortex, as if she had gone to an unknown endless distance. Amon suddenly heard Morin's voice. Peloponnes has transcended eternal life. I'm going to the divine realm to see how she is doing. You should take this opportunity to attack the underworld. Dums, who was still in a daze, suddenly heard Amon say, Your sister has transcended eternal life and become the goddess of spring and life of the Anunnaki divine clan. Morin has gone to the divine realm to see how she is doing, and it may be a long time before she returns. You can wait in the human world. I hope you can achieve this achievement soon, but the test will not be easy. You have seen it with your own eyes. If other gods heard Amon's words, they would definitely be stunned, because he had inadvertently given Peloponnes the title of a god, which was usually something that only a god of creation could do. Amon did not mean it, but the words that came out of his mouth were very bold. When Dums heard these words in his soul, Amon had already waved the eye of sealing down from the clouds, directly hitting a target that did not seem to exist in midair. It was a node of the underworld's spatial enchantment, which had just been pierced by the black lightning. If Kella wanted to repair it, it would take at least 10 days to half a month, so it was a good opportunity to attack. Madanzo and Gabriel had witnessed the scene of Enkidu's fall, and although they were shocked, they were not stunned, and followed Amon and rushed out. As for the other oracles present, it was the first time for them to witness how a mortal became a god. The shock in their souls was indescribable. They stood there for a long time, unable to react. However, the most intense battle suddenly broke out. The boundary of the underworld could not be restored for the time being. If Amon was allowed to rush in, Kella would not be able to resist. Even if Nergal and Kella joined forces, they would not be a match for Amon and the other divine emissaries present. Nergal's reaction was even faster than Amon's. His figure transformed into a streak of light as he descended, strangely disappearing into the space where the tip of Amon's sword was pointing. He rushed into the mansion of the dead to block Amon's sword. Just as Amon's sword was about to slash down, it was forced back by a huge force. He hurriedly withdrew his sword and shouted, All of you retreat quickly. The disciples flew back, but Artemis flew forward and stood beside Amon. Nergal suddenly appeared in the void again. The space where he stood was constantly expanding, and countless invisible shadows emerged. He actually used his last resort, using the gap that appeared in the boundary of the underworld to summon the countless undead imprisoned in the mansion of the dead. These were not the auras left behind by creatures that had disappeared, but the undead that had truly passed away. As long as they could not free themselves from their desires before their death, they would be imprisoned in the mansion of the dead for a long time, serving the Queen of Kella and building her domain of divine power. Nergal continued to summon the undead. These souls did not know that they were dead, and their desires converged into an increasingly powerful spiritual attack that even Amon could not resist. However, even the underworld king would not use such a method. It was tantamount to suicide, and even the mansion of the dead would be destroyed. Nergal pointed his long sword at Amon, his whole body trembling violently. It was not easy to control the seemingly endless undead. After Peloponnes disappeared, the gray vortex in the sky had already shrunk and closed, but now it slowly rotated and unfolded again. The endless and irresistible power seemed to tear open another crack in the world, and it was aimed directly at Nergal. The test ran from beginning to end, and even the gods had to bear the consequences of their actions. If Nergal really launched such an attack, Amon would not be able to resist it, but it would also be beyond what he could withstand. Even if he could barely activate it, the gray vortex would probably immediately suck him in. Amon summoned the chariot of 7 winds and pulled Artemis into the chariot's protection. Artemis's beautiful face was already pale. She waved her hand and summoned a crescent of light, enveloping herself and Amon. She shouted at Nergal, Do you want to die? Even if you use this method to defeat Amon, what's the point? Nurgle's voice could not hide the weakness in it. Even if the mansion of the dead is destroyed, it can be rebuilt in the future, and Kella will be safe. Artemis and Amon quietly retreated in the air, and Nergal had already slowly raised his sword. The space that had expanded and spread out just now was shrinking again, and countless undead were gathered at the tip of Nergal's sword. When the circulation of his magic power reached its limit, the sword would slash down. Amon should have admitted defeat. If Nergal completely raised his sword, the situation would be out of control. At this moment, the barrier of the mansion of the dead was completely opened. A figure flew out and hugged Nergal, pulling his arm and shouting, "No, you can't do this." It was hard for mortals to imagine how heavy Nergal's sword was at this moment, and the person who was hugging his waist and pulling his arm was also a god. Nergal's whole body trembled and his hand loosened. He could no longer hold the sword. It left the god's hand and lost the protection of his divine power. Before it landed, it turned into powder. Suddenly, mournful cries came from the plateau, and all the undead lost control. Like a tsunami, they rushed out in all directions and soon disappeared. The undead imprisoned in the mansion of the dead were all released at this moment. This was also a kind of soul attack that could not be controlled. Amon took Artemis and retreated far away. The divine emissaries had long since scattered in all directions. When the tsunami-like undead had dispersed, Kella still stood in the air with Nergal in her arms. The Queen of the Dead had used her divine power to protect her and Nergal. This scene also meant that her mansion of the dead had been destroyed. Kella's eyes were closed and tears were streaming down her face. A god who had transcended eternal life could also cry. This was too strange. Because gods were only an existence that was a fusion of body and soul, they were different from mortals. Even if they were injured, they would not bleed, let alone shed tears. Kella's tears fell on Nergal's chest and strangely fused into his body. There were also teardrops fluttering in the air. Amon stretched out a hand, and the flying teardrops were attracted by a force and turned into a lotus that appeared in the palm of his hand. But Nergal was smiling. He hugged Kella and bowed his head softly. "I finally see you." Kella stopped crying, and her voice was slightly trembling. "I haven't opened my eyes yet," Nergal replied. "You are a god. Gods do not need to open their eyes to see anything, as long as you can see me." Amon coughed and put away the lotus in his palm. "You two, you can talk about your own things later. Don't forget that our business is not over yet." Kella suddenly turned around, opened her eyes, and stood in front of Nergal. "As you wish, the mansion of the dead has been destroyed. Amon, what else do you want?" Amon spread out his hands. "I don't want anything. Before I came, I had asked you Namna to tell the gods that my purpose is not to hurt you. I just do not want to see such an underworld exist. Before I became a god, I came to your underworld in search of my father's soul. My father and his people could not free themselves from the memories of a lifetime, so they were imprisoned in the underworld and could not leave. It was I who released them. When I became a god, I made a vow to tear down this underworld and release all the souls. Today, I have done it, and I have fulfilled one of my wishes." Nergal let out a long sigh. "Ammonius, I understand why you want to do this, but the underworld is very important to a divine clan. Do you not allow the Anunnaki to exist in the underworld? This request will not be accepted. If you tear down this underworld, another underworld will be built in the future. If you do not allow it, you will be making an enemy of the Anunnaki. Destroying a world but not being able to create another is not an achievement that the gods pursue." Amon actually laughed. "Nergal, don't forget that this underworld was not destroyed by me, but by you and Kella. Building another underworld is the achievement that the two of you pursue. When I was fighting with you just now, I have shown all kinds of reflections of the undead world. I wonder if you can resonate with them?" The underworld was indeed very important to a divine clan, because it could receive the undead with intelligence in the divine realm. And it was also the most important way for the gods to grasp the truth of the human world. Everyone's soul imprint could not be concealed at the moment of death. Some people might wonder how the gods understood and grasped the true beliefs of the human world. But this question was meaningless to the gods, because souls could not be deceived. But the structure of the underworld was also different. Amon had just shown all kinds of reflections of the soul world, some of which he had personally experienced, some of which were shown to him by others, and some of which were just the ideals that he had vowed. Amon did not intend and could not ask the Anunnaki to have no underworld. His words were very clear, he just did not want to see such an underworld. If the Anunnaki divine clan rebuilt that kind of underworld, it was not impossible for another Amon to appear. Before Nergal could speak, Kella understood what he meant. She did not look back but said to Nergal, "To rebuild the underworld, you should become the new underworld king of the Anunnaki divine clan." Nergal replied, "You and I can become the new underworld king together." Kella had already expressed her desire to rebuild the underworld, and Nergal said that he and Kella would both be underworld kings of the Anunnaki divine clan. Artemis reminded, "Either of you can become underworld king, and if you want, you can also rule the underworld together. But only the god of creation can bestow the title of underworld king, which is a form of recognition of the divine clan, so that the undead in the divine realm can be guided into the underworld." Amon smiled. "That is a problem, but now Anu is nowhere to be found. I killed the king of creation, fused with the scroll of destiny, and brought people to destroy the underworld. But I do not want to be an enemy of the Anunnaki divine clan, nor can I just treat it as an enemy. In that case, I will solve this problem for Anu for the time being. When Anu comes back, I will explain it to him face to face." As he spoke, Amon stretched out his hand and summoned a lotus of the absolute beginning. A red sun rose from the center of the flower, and a string of golden divine characters flew out from the red sun, which was a fragment of the scroll of destiny. The golden light wrapped around the figures of Nergal and Kella, and a unique mark entered between the eyebrows of the two. The two gods did not resist, apparently accepting Amon's proposal, and opened their souls to him. If Amon had malicious intentions, this would be a good opportunity to attack, but the gods naturally kept their word. He had only completed a ceremony for the god of creation, and Nergal would become the lord of the Anunnaki underworld along with Kella. Amon had personally killed a god, Adado, and witnessed another divine emissary, Peloponnes, become a god who transcended eternal life. He had destroyed the underworld of the Anunnaki divine clan, but had brought two gods who had mastered the magic of the dead back together. Together, they rebuilt another underworld. He was changing the world around him, and also creating a world. After doing all this, Kella was still in a daze. Nergal had stepped forward to salute Amon, and when Kella saw him in front of him, he closed his eyes again. Nergal just smiled, turned around, and put his arms around Kella, and the two disappeared into the depths of the valley at the same time. Artemis suddenly let out a long sigh, and Amon turned his head and asked, "Why do you sigh like that?" Artemis looked at him and shook her head gently. "The practice of gods is different from that of mortals. Gods who already have eternal life do not actually need to practice anything as long as they can enter a divine realm. You entered the divine realm of Ennead because you killed a king, but obtained Anu's lotus of the absolute beginning, and because you killed another king, you obtained Anu's scroll of destiny. You were outside of the divine clans, but you changed the achievements of the creator of each divine clan. Thus, you changed the underworld of the Anunnaki divine clan. The reason for the gods to break through to a higher level is because of this. And judging from what you have done today, I am afraid that the realm that you can verify is already higher than mine. I am just sighing with emotion." Amon also shook his head gently. "It's not good to say that although I have verified some states of mind, my years of practice are far less long than yours." Artemis smiled bitterly. "Amon, how old are you? Although there is no need to calculate the age of the gods, it has only been a short 28 years since you were born. There is no shortage of people in the world who have lived for more than 100 years, but can their experiences and actions compare to yours? My magic power is indeed deeper than yours now, but the realm of the gods is not compared to this. I can't even imagine what kind of god you will become in the future. At least the achievements of Anu and Anu are not difficult for you." Amon smiled. "If it's hard to imagine, then don't think about it. When a child is born, no one can imagine what kind of person he will become. We can only look at what he has learned, thought, done, and taken. Compared with the ancient gods of creation like Anu or Anu, I still lack the accumulation of 1,000 years. Artemis blinked and said, even if it is only a 9th-level divine emissary who has passed the test of endless life, the accumulation of his soul and knowledge is beyond imagination, which is the foundation for the achievement of the Creator after transcending eternal life. Although you have not practiced for 1,000 years, you have obtained the lotus of the absolute beginning and the scroll of destiny, which contain the spiritual imprint and cultivation knowledge of Anu and Anu's creation of the divine realm. Amon smiled bitterly. That is just a kind of inheritance. I used to be the guard of the Temple of Isis's archives. The lotus of the absolute beginning and the scroll of destiny are like books in the collection to me. The chief high priest of Assyria, Faust, is well-read and unparalleled in his knowledge, but that does not mean that he has the highest achievements. I am the same, I still need to verify the fusion. Artemis grabbed his arm and shook it. So you know what you are going to do. I don't need to remind you again. I just want to ask, when can you take me to find trouble with Osiris? Amon replied. Anura wants me to kill Seth after I become a creator, but I'm not in a hurry now that I've become a creator. I want to verify my own world first, and then kill Seth along the way. I am afraid it will take a while, but this little time is nothing for the gods. Artemis pouted a little playfully, but there was a clear smile in her eyes. She looked at Amon and said, well, I will wait for you. I don't know how long it will take. What kind of surprise will you bring me? Artemis left, and Dums returned to the divine palace of Ea to wait for the return of Peloponnes. The once arrogant 9th-level divine emissary finally learned to be calm in front of Ammonius. Amon's achievements had not only long surpassed his, but even his current realm was beyond his imagination, not to mention what he had done. Dums should think about what he should do. Amon did not return to the Garden of Eden with the disciples, but came to the divine palace of the city of Talung. After closing the door in an inner hall, the god called all the disciples to him, and also called the leaders of the people of Talung, Aesop and Joshua, to hold a special meeting. The first words that Amon said were, I am going to leave, and I do not know how long this will be. It may be many years, and it may be that many people in this city will never see me again. Most of the people in Talung had seen Amon or Ammonius with their own eyes, and there were two meanings of never seeing him again. One was that Amon would never appear in front of them again, and the other was that Amon would not return until these people's lives were over. As for which specific situation it was, the god did not explain. Madanzo reacted the fastest and immediately asked, My god, are you going to leave the world to practice the power of the gods? Don't worry, the Anunnaki divine clan has been dealt with, and we will naturally guard the Garden of Eden and Talung. Chapter 274. Amon gave Joshua a special order. I was born a miner in Duk, and it was I who guided the people to build the city of Talung on the site of Duk. So the people of Talung thought that they were blessed by the gods, and they even forgot that they were once sinners who were punished and exiled by the gods. Even though the god they believe in is called Allah, because of my birth, I have imperceptibly become their so-called glory. I hope you understand that the gods will not always look after them just because they once looked after them. When this generation passes away, the new generation will not experience the suffering of their ancestors, but they will inherit the wealth and glory of their ancestors. But there are some things that cannot be inherited, although they think they can. The gods have helped the people, but it does not mean that the people will become nobler, and it does not mean that the gods will owe them an eternal promise. People will only be noble because they are noble, and this has nothing to do with the gods who look after them. My disciples remained in the Garden of Eden, guarding only my belief in the human world. One day, Talung may become a kingdom, but this kingdom may also be conquered. Even my statue will be destroyed by the enemy or the people themselves, just like many kingdoms in the human world. If the faith is gone, there will be nothing to protect, and my disciples can only watch it happen. Ammonius finally finished his speech. Joshua nodded and did not say anything, only thinking about it in his heart. He had a vague guess that Ammonius was probably Allah, but Ammonius did not say it explicitly, so he could not say it. At this time, Amon heard Murin's voice in his soul asking, Are you making a prophecy? The reason why Amon chose to convene the meeting in the shrine was that he wanted Murin to participate. Murin was now in the divine kingdom, but she could find out everything and communicate with the statue in the divine realm. Amon replied in his soul, "Maybe not a prophecy. This is the norm in the human world." Gabriel frowned and asked, "My God, you mean that one day your statue may also be destroyed, and if the people here forget the faith you guide, we will no longer have to protect this city. But in that case, you will lose the source of divine power, which is what the gods fight for." Amon looked at her and replied, "Since you all worship me as the only God, even after transcending eternal life, you will not call yourself a god. So what I accept is not an illusory glory and status. I must achieve the corresponding achievements and bear the due responsibility. My vow is different from that of other gods. I do not want to become that kind of god and establish that kind of divine clan." Link also frowned and said, "I am afraid that the believers in the human world will not understand. They will still choose their own way." Amon shook his head again. People can choose their own way to express their faith. I have seen too many people use the name of the gods to coerce the people to fulfill their own desires. Otherwise, how could there only be a few of you in my Garden of Eden? The disciples nodded silently, and Amon stood up and said, "Gabriel, come with me, I have something to say in private." After arranging the affairs of the human world, Amon took Gabriel out of Diling, and came to the sky above the charcoal marsh. Standing on the clouds, he said, "I don't know how many years it will take for me to be gone, and I don't know what will happen to the human world. Among the disciples, the most worried are Madanzo and you. If something happens to Madanzo, it is because of his state of mind, but if something happens to you, I am afraid it has something to do with your experience." Gabriel bowed and said, "My God, I don't quite understand what you mean." Amon asked again, "You have witnessed with your own eyes how Enkidu fell, and how Peloponnes transcended eternal life. You should know that the test of fate, the judgment of the end of days, is not easy to pass." Gabriel nodded and replied, "Yes, I have seen it with my own eyes. If there is a day like that for me, it is exactly what I look forward to, without a trace of fear." Amon smiled slightly. "I know you very well. If there is anyone among my disciples who can face that test first, it should be you. In order to help you pass the test in the future, I will leave you something and teach you how to use it." Amon took out a golden parangan and handed it to Gabriel. Gabriel was surprised. "This is what Maria left behind. Your most precious thing. You still need to use it to find a new life for Maria's soul. Why give it to me?" What Amon gave to Gabriel was the god's tear left behind by Maria. He used to have 2 such parangons, and the other one was passed down by the saintess of the Temple of Isis. In the judgment of the end of days, the parangan used to cast the guardian magic, but the result was that the parangan was destroyed in the black lightning, and strangely turned into a golden droplet and merged with Amon's body. Amon's personal experience proved one thing: the guardian of Isis was an excellent means to protect the body against the final test, but the premise was to master the true essence of this magic. Gabriel, who was also from the Temple of Isis, had the most experience in practicing this magic. And using the god's tear left behind by the saintess as an instrument, the effect of the guardian of Isis would be incredible. Amon knew how strong Gabriel's soul was, but he also knew her experience. She had carried out missions for the temple and killed many powerful enemies and monsters. When the final test came, he was not sure if he could pass it. Only by giving her this god's tear, Amon could leave with peace of mind. Gabriel did not reach out to take it, but looked up at Amon and said, "Although I do not know what the final test contains, I know it will not be easy. I heard that your other god's tear was destroyed when you became a god. If I also destroy this one, how will you find Maria? This is Mary. Can't I take the spiritual guidance that you left for you?" Amon shook his head and said, "If I don't give it to you, I'm afraid I will never find her. For you and me, Maria has always symbolized blessing and protection, just like the glory of this god's tear. She gave you my 2 letters at the same time, asking you to follow me and protect me. She also asked me to give you another kind of guidance and protection. If I keep this parangan knowing that you will fall, will she be willing to see it? With such a heart, How can I find her? So I want to give it to you before I leave. If you face the test, use it to protect yourself. Its golden light is also the gaze of me and Maria. I can't know exactly what will happen when you face the test. This parangan may not necessarily be destroyed. If it is safe and sound, you can return it to me when I return. Maybe there is another possibility, and I will welcome you. Gabriel finally accepted the god's tear, and Amon left the human world for the eternal. The believers of the human world have not seen this god for many years. Once again, Amon opened up a lonely space-time and quietly refined the lotus of the beginning and the scroll of destiny in this empty world. He didn't know how much time had passed. The wonders of this space-time were unimaginable. Amon could not even be seen. There was only a lotus flower in the middle of loneliness. At the center of the flower was a red sun, and on the surface of the red sun were countless golden divine runes flowing. Before Amon left the human world, he made a vow that if he could not completely fuse the lotus of absolute beginning and the scroll of destiny, he would never appear again. The golden divine characters appeared densely and turned into the scroll of the red sun. Gradually, it completely fused with the red sun. The lotus wrapped around the red sun, as if it was strangely shrinking. The space-time also slowly shrank. A circle of light shot out of the lotus bud. It was the golden light of Amon's body, like the god's tear. At this moment, this unbloomed lotus was Amon himself. He had completely integrated the spiritual imprint and cultivation knowledge contained in the lotus of absolute beginning and the scroll of destiny into his body and soul. No one knew what realm this god had now. Even Amon himself did not know. He had to evolve and verify it in some way. The lotus gradually shrunk into a golden dot of light, before disappearing into eternity. Artemis, who was far away in the divine realm of Olympus, was slightly shocked. The vague feeling of Amon in her soul disappeared. They had left each other's imprints in each other's souls, so when Amon called for Schrödinger, Artemis could always hear him, and when Amon entered the eternal, Artemis could always find him. But at this moment, the situation had changed. Either Amon had fallen, or Amon's realm had surpassed Artemis's, and for some purpose, he had completely hidden his body and soul, which was equivalent to not existing, and even Artemis could not perceive him. Amon should not have fallen, which could only prove one thing. The vow he made before he left the human world this time had been fulfilled. Artemis was extremely shocked, happy for Amon, but also a trace of inexplicable disappointment. Amon disappeared. There was no concept of time and space in eternity. Everything was without beginning, without end, without end, without end, and without end. Amon was the god, the heart was the body, the soul was the existence, and the perception was the eyes. When he opened his eyes again in the chaos, a voice came from the eternal, "Let there be light." When the soul opened its eyes, there was light, the beginning of the world in the void, and the beginning of all existence. Everything had its name first, and things that did not exist naturally could not be described or described. Here, the light was not necessarily the meaning of brightness, but more a symbol of perception and existence. Amon did not know that in the distant world, there were also people who left scriptures which opened with the words, "The nameless beginning of heaven and earth, the nameless mother of all things." Those who received its teachings called this eternal, the boundless and mysterious world, and the creation of something out of nothing, the art of spiritual creation. From then on, Amon opened up a world, which was chaotic at first, like a dark abyss, and when the soul opened its eyes and saw the light, it also meant the emergence of darkness. The alternation of light and darkness was like the day and night of the human world. Amon's figure appeared, and he closed his eyes again, as if a day had passed in the human world. When Amon opened his eyes again, what he saw in his soul had evolved into a familiar scene of the human world. This world finally had the concept of up and down, left and right, as if a second day had passed. The water on the ground gathered and merged into rivers, lakes, and seas. Plants grew on the land. If one looked carefully, the world, although vast, seemed familiar. It was centered on the town of Duk, where Amon grew up, and spread out along his footprints. It was like the human world, and yet not. The town of Duk was not so desolate, nor was it as noisy as the city of Talung. It was like the most beautiful and peaceful scene in the ideal countryside. With the creation of the world, Aman seemed to have completed the journey of his life. It seemed like the third day had passed. The sun, the moon, and the stars appeared, and the light shone on this world, but it was different from the human world. The so-called light and darkness were just a feeling, which coincided with the soul's desire. It seemed like the fourth day had passed. On the fifth day, the first creatures appeared in this world, fish in the water. Aman once told Schrödinger that there were fish in the world. This was the eternal world that Aman had created at this moment. These creatures were also created by Aman based on his own knowledge, including the knowledge that had been integrated into his soul, the lotus of the absolute beginning, and the scroll of destiny. The world became rich and colorful. But these creatures were different from those in the human world. Their lives could be eternal, and they could also be reborn according to the will of the Creator. Reincarnation. But they could not escape from this world. They could only belong to this world. Just like before Aman became a god, he could not escape from the human world. When people looked up at the stars, they often wondered if there were other lives on the distant stars. Were such lives gods? There were also gods who left the earth and flew to distant stars, spending countless years searching. But no matter how far they flew, even if they arrived on distant stars, even if there were different mountains and rivers and different creatures, the space-time they were in was still the so-called human world. Where was the real divine kingdom? In the eternal eternity after transcendence. No transcendence. Without guidance, without creation, there was no peak. On the sixth day of this world, Aman looked at the countless creatures appearing and suddenly realized that there was one thing missing, and that was people. The soul created a world that did not exist. It was creating something out of nothing. But this was based on knowledge. The things created had to appear in the soul in a single thought. They could not appear out of thin air. It was quite difficult for a god to create a person that contained all the wisdom and bloodline of a human. Aman pointed at the soil on the ground and blew, and a person really appeared. This person's figure and appearance were exactly the same as Aman, and he appeared naked in the other Garden of Eden created in the divine kingdom. When Aman created this person, he first gave him all the characteristics that he had as a human. 6 days passed in the divine kingdom, and Aman's enormous mana was exhausted. He hid himself and rested between heaven and earth. Just like that, another 7th day passed. On the 8th day, Aman suddenly opened his eyes again, as if he had sensed something in the human world that he had long expected. Gabriel finally ushered in the final test. In the test, his body and soul were greatly damaged, but he did not die. He obtained the achievement of transcendence and entered the eternal eternity. Aman was a different kind of god on the continent. He did not join any divine clan. And after his disciples transcended eternal life, if there was no guidance, they might be lost in the eternal eternity for a long time. When mortals achieved this state for the first time, they often could not even grasp their own existence for a while. This was a very important meaning of the guidance of the divine clan. Now that Aman had created a world, if he could guide Gabriel into this world, it would be Aman's divine kingdom, which was equivalent to Aman's achievement as the god of creation. If he could not open this world and guide Gabriel in, it would mean that he only had the achievement of the Creator. What the truth was, as long as he tried it, he would know. If Gabriel could not come in, then Aman would leave, as Artemis once did, temporarily opening a lonely space and time to guard Gabriel's recovery. If Gabriel came in, it would not only mean that Aman had verified the achievement of the god of creation, but it would also mean that Aman would not be able to leave. The god of creation could not leave the divine kingdom that he had created, unless Aman also refined something and integrated it into the divine kingdom like anew and returned to the human world in the form of a new soul. But if he did that, it would mean that the god of creation himself did not exist during this time. This was not the result that Aman wanted to verify. Should he guide Gabriel in or not? If he failed, there was nothing to say, but if he succeeded, it would make Aman enter the realm of the god of creation. This was a dilemma. Aman closed his eyes and seemed to enter a kind of meditation. In fact, a god like him did not need to meditate. It was just an external manifestation of his body and soul, symbolizing his re-verification and evolution in his soul. Suddenly his heart was moved. He could open this world and let Gabriel in. And he could create a divine clan and become the god of creation with a single thought. However, at this moment, Amon made a decision that no one expected. With a wave of his hand, a monstrous flood surged up and swept the earth. The flood spread all the way to the sky. The sky and the earth disappeared again, and everything returned to darkness and chaos. The world was destroyed. Amon destroyed the world created by Wangyu the moment before Gabriel felt the guidance of the divine kingdom and was about to enter it. If he only wanted to verify the achievement of the creator, then the world he created could be preserved after he left, but it did not exist for other gods and creatures in the world. If he wanted to become the god of creation, he already had such an achievement, and he could bring Gabriel in. But Amon's vow was not to become such a god. When he gave guidance to Gabriel, he stepped into the void and into the eternal. The divine kingdom created by Wangyu was destroyed because of the departure of the god of creation, Amon. Or it could be said that Amon also gave up the divine kingdom at the same time he sought to verify the god of creation. It was as if nothing had happened, but the realm that this god instantly verified was indescribable. The god of creation of the Ennead, Anila, once asked Amon what was the end of human desire. The answer was to have the whole world. And everything in the world was in line with one's will. This was impossible for anyone to achieve, and the way to verify it was to create a world in one's own soul. Chapter 275. 256 The Rise of the Kingdom of Potsdam. Gabriel passed the test of fate and the judgment of doomsday. She disappeared into the gray vortex and reached immortality. The pain she suffered from the black lightning attack instantly disappeared. In a world with nothing, there was no pain. Even she did not exist. She did not know how much time had passed because there was no concept of time. In the human world, it might only be a moment, but it might also be a long time. Gabriel finally came back to her senses. At this moment, she was a kind of idealistic existence. When her soul became clear, this god finally woke up. Inexplicably, she felt a kind of guidance. It seemed that she could step into another world with one step. She had already seen a bit of light in a place that seemed to be very far away, but also very close. She was about to fly towards this bit of light, or it should be said that this bit of light took the initiative to approach her, as if it wanted to lead her into another world. But then the bit of light disappeared. While Gabriel was stunned, Amon's figure suddenly appeared in front of her. With a wave of his hand, he opened up a lonely space and time. A piece of complex and profound information was imprinted into Gabriel's soul. At the same time, she also felt the pain caused by the injury of her body and soul. Amon gave up the world he created and temporarily opened up a space and time for Gabriel to heal. He told her many mysteries after transcending immortality. Gabriel bowed to Amon. When she stood up again, she had already returned to her normal appearance. She held a shining golden god stone in her hand and handed it to Amon. My god, with the protection of this god stone, I finally passed the test and came before you. This god stone is not damaged, but there is an additional tear stain. Amon took the god's tear left by Maria. In the faint golden light, he saw the tear stain. This tear stain was not a crack, nor was it the lines of the god stone itself. All ordinary god stones and all kinds of special god stones did not contain any impurities. No matter what color they were pure and transparent without any flaws. If there was a crack on it, it would immediately be destroyed and turned into powder. This tear stain appeared in the light. No matter from which angle the god stone was turned, the tear stain would appear in the place where the eyes were staring. There was no need for gods to communicate with each other. The information imprinted in the soul could clearly explain everything. Amon nodded and held up the god's tear. Golden light sprinkled on Gabriel's body as it guarded this god, who had transcended eternal life as she healed. Time passed for an unknown amount of time. Gabriel's injury was gradually recovering. There was no need to stay in this lonely space and time. She could return to the human world and recuperate by herself in the god's garden. Amon, on the other hand, intended to wait for her to fully recover before teaching her some of the mysteries of the god's training, so he had been quietly standing in the lonely space and time with the god's tear. But before Amon, the God's God, of God's God of God, suddenly of the God of God in front of him, Gabriel also sensed it. She raised her head from a seemingly meditative state and asked, "My God, what has happened to make you so shocked? What accident could disturb Amon, who could even give up the divine realm he created with his own hands?" Two things happened at the same time. One was that in the human world, the supreme mage Goliath, whom Amon respected as a teacher, was killed in battle. The second was that Amon heard a distant call from the distant Anunnaki divine kingdom. Goliath's prestige in the Hittite kingdom was even greater than that of the gods, and his status and glory were unparalleled. What kind of war would require him to be on the front lines? How could the most outstanding military commander on the continent die in battle? Things had to start from the beginning. It had been 12 years since Amon left the human world. It took Amon 3 years to refine and fuse the lotus of the beginning and the scroll of destiny in his soul, 7.5 years to create a divine realm until its destruction, and another 1.5 years to guard Gabriel and heal his wounds. Before Gabriel's arrival, Amon had been focused on nothing and did not pay attention to anything that happened in the human world. In these 12 years, earth-shaking changes had taken place on the continent, and the fates of almost all the people that Amon had met in the various countries had changed. All of this happened, in a sense, because of the emergence of a god, Marduk, who had left the Anunnaki divine clan. In the human world, there was also the rise of a kingdom, the Kingdom of Pots. The Kingdom of Pots was located far to the east of the continent, and historically, it was a desolate and remote place that did not attract much attention. There were many primitive tribes in weak countries, and Pots was just one of them. The process of the rise of Pots was the process of the annexation and integration of these tribes and countries, but Pots had very little contact with the countries of the continent, and people did not know much about it. The most experienced mortal that Amon had ever seen was Aesop, the slave governor who had been to many places and recorded countless legends. On the way back home, Moses and the others were tempted by a strange god who called himself Barkley. Amon had heard of this name in the story told by Aesop, and he was the god that the Kingdom of Pots believed in. Amon also suspected that this Barkley might be another identity of Marduk. Amon's guess was right. Barkley was another name for Marduk, just as Amon had another name called Allah or Satan. The name of a god was not a title of praise offered by the divine temples in the human world. Each name corresponded to a unique identity and a unique guidance, and the believers of the world did not even know its true meaning. Before Amon left the human world, the Kingdom of Pots ushered in the fastest era of prosperity and expansion in its history, which was directly related to the campaigns of Emperor Sinek. When the Assyrian Empire rose, Emperor Sinek not only attacked Babylon and the plains of Duk, but also launched an expedition to the eastern border of the empire, slaughtering many weak tribes and countries. Many loose tribes and countries were unable to protect themselves, and afraid of the brutality of the Assyrian Empire. And in order to survive and protect themselves, they turned to the increasingly powerful Kingdom of Pots in the east. As a result, the territories of Pots and Assyria extended in the east and west respectively, and eventually evolved into a state of bordering each other, and the situation temporarily stabilized. After the assassination of Sinek, a talented and bold monarch named Cyrus appeared in the Kingdom of Pots. Empress Samir made the decision to recall Faust and the Giant Legion and abandon the plains of Duk, partly because she felt the pressure of the rise of the Kingdom of Pots in the east. After returning to the kingdom, Faust stayed in the royal capital of Nive, while the Giant Legion was sent to the eastern border to prevent an attack from the Kingdom of Pots. Samir believed that if the Kingdom of Pots continued to expand westward, the first to bear the brunt of the war should be the Assyrian Empire. But Samir guessed wrong. The Kingdom of Pots avoided the main force and first launched an attack on the Kingdom of Elam, north of Assyria, not long after Amon left the human world. To the north of the Assyrian Empire, in ancient times, there was a barren land where some nomadic tribes lived. These tribes were influenced by the civilization of the continent and learned to build city-states. During the migration, they gradually settled and merged, establishing a country called Elam. Cyrus's army first conquered Elam, and after destroying the kingdom, he established a province, appointed a governor in charge of litigation, taxation, and internal security, and transformed the primitive kingdom into a modern city-state, establishing a complete set of administrative and military systems. Shortly after the annexation of Elam, the army of Pots continued to advance westward, bypassing the Assyrian Empire from the north and directly reaching the northeastern border of the Hittite kingdom, capturing the city of Ludi in Hittite. Ludi was located in the northeastern corner of the Hittite kingdom, close to the edge of the wilderness, and had always been harassed by scattered nomadic tribes. The city's defenses were lax, and when the army of Pots invaded, it collapsed. The army sent by King Ashur rushed to the border to fight, but in the end, they were defeated by Cyrus. The king, who had been arrogant ever since he ascended to the throne, finally realized that the situation was not good, so he personally visited Goliath to command the army. In recent years, Goliath had stopped paying attention to the mundane affairs of the Hittite kingdom. He knew that his prestige in the kingdom was too high, and it had affected the authority of King Ashur, so he simply went into hiding to avoid suspicion, and King Ashur was happy to see this. But this time, the situation was different. King Ashur could have sent an envoy to summon Goliath, but he personally went to visit Saya. When Goliath returned, he did two things. The first was to gather troops in Mesopotamia and Budamia, and send them to the northeastern border. These two cities were established during the war, and the garrisons and even the ordinary residents of the cities were capable of fighting. The generals were also personally trained by Goliath. The second thing he did was to send an envoy to the Assyrian Empire to discuss an alliance, and the two countries would join forces to resist the army of Pots. The original strategy of the Assyrian Empire was to sit on the mountain and watch the tigers fight. They believed that the Hittite kingdom was not as weak as Elam, and that the army of Pots would pay a heavy price regardless of victory or defeat. If the army of Pots was defeated, the Assyrian Empire could take the opportunity to attack. If the army of Pots won, the Assyrian Empire could also take advantage of the fatigue to attack from the side and rear. But Goliath told the Assyrian empress that the strength of the kingdom of Pots was beyond their original estimates, and that the Hittite army would not be a match for them. If they really waited until the Hittite kingdom was defeated, according to Cyrus' strategy of gradual encroachment, it would be difficult for the Assyrian Empire to take advantage of the situation. Instead, it would become the next target to be encroached upon. The best strategic choice was to join forces and attack. After some discussion, the Assyrian officials finally agreed that Goliath's judgment was correct. The kingdom of Pots did not lose anything by annexing Elam, but instead, its strength had increased greatly. If they waited until it defeated the Hittite kingdom, the Assyrian Empire would be surrounded on three sides, so they sent an army to attack the enemy's flank. The main battlefield took place in the area of the Hittite kingdom's Rudi and the kingdom of Pots' Elam province. The Hittite kingdom and the Assyrian Empire fought together and repelled the attack of the kingdom of Pots, but the kingdom of Pots still managed to hold on to Elam province. The kingdom of Pots temporarily withdrew its troops. The northern front did not succeed, and the Hittite kingdom and the Assyrian Empire also suffered heavy losses. They were unable to launch an expedition in a short period of time, and so the stalemate continued for several years. After that, Goliath suggested that King Ashur send another envoy to negotiate with the Assyrian Empire, hoping to join forces and take the initiative to attack again. However, King Ashur did not accept this suggestion. He had his reasons for not wanting to launch an expedition. After a great defeat, the Hittite kingdom gathered its strength and joined forces with the Assyrian Empire to repel the attack of the kingdom of Pots. The kingdom of Pots was far to the east of the Assyrian Empire, and even if the Hittite kingdom launched an expedition and won, it would only benefit the Assyrian Empire. The Assyrian Empire would not be able to gain any actual benefits, and it would only greatly deplete their already weakened national strength. At this time, King Cyrus sent another army under the command of the commander-in-chief, Supreme General Darius, to launch another expedition. This time, their target was the Assyrian Empire. The Assyrian Empire had once occupied 6 city-states of the former Kingdom of Babylon, and the Kingdom of Pots and Babylon sent troops to attack these 6 city-states at the same time. The Kingdom of Babylon and the Assyrian Empire were mortal enemies, and Marduk had also sent down an oracle, ordering the kingdom of Babylon to take advantage of this opportunity to launch a counterattack against the Assyrian Empire. King Vonnegut of Babylon gathered his army and attacked from the north to the south, while Darius led his army from the east to the west. The Assyrian Empire could not resist, and this front was too far away from the Hittite kingdom. Even if they wanted to join forces with the Hittite kingdom again, it would be impossible. The army of Pots was unstoppable, and 5 of the 6 city-states were captured by Darius. Babylon also took the opportunity to recover the city of Lis. From the results of this war, it could be seen that the combat power of the Assyrian Empire was far inferior to that of Sinnoh. When they expanded their territory, they slaughtered too many people, and the conquered areas suffered heavy losses. The people were forced to migrate and become slaves, and the soldiers became the new nobles. They had lost their arrogance and spirit, and were not popular with the people. In theory, the 6 city-states had already been officially ceded to the Assyrian Empire, and they were no longer Babylon's territory. The king Vonnegut only wanted to take back as much as he could. However, the army of Babylon only captured 1 city-state, while the army of Pots occupied the other 5. From this, the difference in combat power between the 2 countries could be seen. After conquering the 5 city-states from the Assyrian Empire, the kingdom of Pots established a new province. Cyrus pursued a military state policy similar to that of Sinnoh. He maintained the privileged status of all the people of Pots, and made all the adult men of Pots obedient to the king. As for the conquered areas, the kingdom of Pots established a new province and sent a governor to manage it. The status of the local nobles was retained, and they continued to represent the kingdom of Pots. The kingdom of Pots digested the conquered areas very quickly. If the residents of the new province joined the army, they could also be rewarded with military merits and become the new nobles of the conquered areas. Thus, the kingdom of Pots could constantly replenish its soldiers. After establishing the new province, the kingdom of Pots made a request to the kingdom of Babylon to cross the Euphrates River and attack the Hittite kingdom from the south. The kingdom of Pots had to pass through the city of Kish. King Vonnegut of Babylon knew that if the kingdom of Pots crossed the Euphrates River and defeated the Hittite kingdom, the kingdom of Babylon would be in danger. So he refused the request. Cyrus sent an envoy to reprimand the kingdom of Babylon. Under the guidance of the oracle and the help of the kingdom of Pots, they defeated their mortal enemy, Assyria, and recovered the city of Lis. The kingdom of Pots used this as an excuse to attack the city of Kish, and Cyrus ordered Darius to lead the army to attack Hittite again. The Hittite kingdom's heavy troops were still in the city of Ludi in the north, but the army of the kingdom of Pots launched a surprise attack from the south. King Ashur thought that Darius would march from the southern shore of the inland lake and break through the city of Saya into Hittite territory, so he transferred the garrisons of Mesopotamia and Budamia to the south of the inland lake. Unexpectedly, Darius led his army into the plains of Duk and captured the city of Budamia in the first battle. King Ashur urgently ordered the main force of the garrison to return to the northern shore of the inland lake, but Darius suddenly turned around and took a detour to the southern shore of the inland lake, defeating the garrison and taking advantage of the situation to attack the city of Saya. King Ashur's judgment of the main direction of the Pots army's attack was correct, but there was a mistake in the details of the tactical command, and by the time Goliath led the main force of the kingdom back to support them, the defeat was already irreversible. The Pots army broke through the city of Saya and advanced all the way into the hinterland of the Hittite kingdom. Approaching the capital, the main force of Hittite was defeated, and more than half of the territory was occupied. The commander-in-chief of the Pots army, Darius, sent a messenger to King Ashur and the generals of the cities that were still holding on, reading out Cyrus's national policy. As long as they surrendered, the kingdom of Pots would retain their property and noble status, and the Hittite kingdom would be divided into several provinces of Pots. Several cities surrendered, and King Ashur was also ready to surrender. If he did not surrender, as a king, only death awaited him after his defeat. If he surrendered, even though he would lose the throne, he would still be the largest noble in Hittite, enjoying a large territory and slaves, and one of the rulers representing the kingdom of Pots. At this time, Goliath found King Ashur, and the two had a long talk. Goliath told Asher that if he surrendered, the kingdom of Hittite would cease to exist. This was not the same as being defeated or surrendering, but being completely annexed and wiped out of existence. Goliath did not surrender, and he asked King Asher to give him full authority to summon and lead all the people in Hittite who were unwilling to surrender to carry out a final resistance and gather their strength for a decisive battle. He said to King Asher, "If I win, Hittite will survive. If I lose, surrender if you wish." The war launched by the Kingdom of Pots also meant that Marduk was attacking the Anunnaki divine clan, and this god wanted to annex the entire divine realm of the Anunnaki. The Pots' army captured the city of Kish in the Kingdom of Babylon, but they did not destroy Marduk's shrine. Instead, they allowed the local soldiers, nobles, and priests to retain their original beliefs. The ordinary people did not understand what happened between the gods, and even more so did not know that Enlil had fallen, and that Marduk had left the Anunnaki divine clan. In their view, it was just one main god replacing another, so the resistance of the nobles and priests was not strong. Chapter 276. Faced with the king's question, Goliath answered, "The reason is simple, because I am a Hittite. Although being a Hittite does not make me more noble, just as a Hittite is not necessarily more noble than a Babylonian, an Assyrian, an Igut, or a Bozite. But no matter who you are, you must respect your own existence in order to find the value of your existence, which has nothing to do with the gods you believe in. The reason why living beings are living beings is not because they are clearly aware of their own existence, so they are able to think about the meaning of their existence. If I sacrifice myself, it is of my own free will, but if I give up against my beliefs and even deny myself, I will never have a more noble achievement. Why is it not necessarily glorious to fight against Hittite? It depends on what kind of war it is, but if a Hittite person betrays even Hittite, it must be a disgrace. Your Majesty the King, I am not accusing you of having the idea of surrendering. It may just be a choice you made out of helplessness. But for me, I can't make such a choice, and it doesn't matter." Goliath gathered the last remnants of the Hittite kingdom, and the warriors who swore not to surrender, and fought against the tens of thousands of Bozite troops outside the capital, and the supreme mage was eventually killed. After Goliath's death, King Asher opened the city and surrendered, followed by all the cities in Hittite. The kingdom of Bozite annexed Hittite, divided the ancient kingdom into three, and established three new provinces, which need not be described in detail. Ammon was invincible in the heart of the Eternal, but at the moment after Goliath's death, the quiet soul of the god was disturbed, and he heard a call from a distant divine kingdom. Ammon put away the god's tear and said to Gabriel, "Your injury is no longer a problem. Go back to the Garden of Eden and recuperate on your own for a few years, but before that, you have to do one thing. In the east of the capital of Hittite, a battle has ended, but the aftermath has not yet subsided, and a few people need to be rescued to the Garden of Eden. Siegel, Elmar, and Rulio have rushed to the battlefield to save people. You rush there to cover and support them." Gabriel accepted the order and left. Now that she had transcended eternal life, she was known as Angel Gabriel among Ammon's disciples. The lonely spacetime that was temporarily open disappeared again. It was still eternal and indestructible. Suddenly, a spot of golden light appeared in a place that seemed to be very far away, but also very close. This golden light flickered and danced, forming a path. Looking closely, this golden path seemed to be formed from many tiny divine characters. Looking at the strokes of those divine characters, they seemed to be formed from even smaller divine characters. Layers upon layers of this endless cycle. Ammon also transformed into a streak of golden light, leaving behind a trail in the air. It was as if he had transformed into a divine rune that was imprinted into it. The next moment, the mountains and rivers appeared, and he appeared in the Anunnaki divine kingdom, who could summon Ammon in the eternal undying, and even disturb his soul. This person had left some kind of imprint in Ammon's soul, and the source was the scroll of destiny that Ammon had refined and fused with. He was Anu, the god of creation of the Anunnaki divine clan. The god of creation had finally returned to the divine kingdom. The mountains and rivers in the Anunnaki divine kingdom resembled the landforms around the Saya plateau. But here, There was a solemn palace on the plateau, with pure white stone pillars and a dome. There were not too many ornate decorations, and it looked both noble and simple. Seeing this palace, Aman was inexplicably reminded of the cedar carriage that Goliath often rode in the mortal world. This was Anu's residence in the divine kingdom. The long steps in front of the palace were crystal clear, and they were one with Ice 11 hanging on the peak of the plateau. Aman appeared on the palace steps formed by Ice 11, and when he looked up, two gods had already come up to greet him. They were the Anunnaki goddess of youth and love Morin, and the Anunnaki goddess of spring and life Peloponnes. Morin had a worried look on her face, but when she saw Aman, she showed a relieved smile and came up to greet him. Are you clear about what happened on the continent? Then she was slightly startled, and she covered her mouth in surprise. Your current realm. Aman opened his arms and gave her a hug, nodding slightly. How is my realm? Even I can't explain it clearly, and I want to see Anu and ask this ancient god of creation for advice. I already know what happened on the continent. Morin replied. Anu is waiting for you, you go and see him first. Aman walked up the long steps, and Peloponnes also came up to greet him. She opened her arms and hugged Aman, then took a step back and bowed. Ammonius, thank you very much. Aman smiled. You should be more grateful to Ea, the god of wisdom who guided you, but no matter what guidance the gods gave you, all these achievements were also obtained by you. Congratulations. Peloponnes, however, had a worried look on her face. I have just achieved transcendence and eternal life and came to the divine kingdom, and the Anunnaki divine clan ushered in the greatest disaster in history, and the realm of the source of divine power in the mortal world is about to be lost. Anu is back, but he wants to see you, and said that this will determine the fate of the Anunnaki divine kingdom. Does he want to invite you to turn the situation around? Aman, I thank you for everything you have done for me, and if Anu has such thoughts, I am also worried for you. Aman patted her on the shoulder. You are a kind-hearted girl, but don't worry. Without the realm of the source of divine power, you are still a god who transcends eternal life, and the Anunnaki divine kingdom is still the divine kingdom. You have not lost anything, have you? Peloponnes lowered her head. But I do not know how to help the gods in you. I am grateful, but I do not know how to repay you. Aman replied. He has helped me build the Garden of Eden, and now that you have come to this divine kingdom, you can make it better. At this time, the two gods of the Anunnaki divine clan, Nergal and Kella, also came over and bowed to Aman. Kella did not speak, and Nergal said, Congratulations, Ammonius. You now have the aura of a god of creation. When Anu returned to the divine kingdom, he only said that the fate of Anunnaki is related to you, and only you can provide help. And you are not a god of this divine clan. If that is the case, the gods will thank you. Aman gently waved his hand. Don't say that. I still don't know what Anu wants to talk to me about. Continuing to climb the long steps, the moon god Nanner and the sun god Utu also came to greet him. It was the first time that Aman met these two gods who had lived in the divine kingdom for a long time. But when he was the head of an army on earth, the first opponent he fought was the army of Nanner of the Hittite kingdom. Now he finally met the god in person. At the end of the long steps stood the god of wisdom, Ea, in front of the palace door. When Ea saw Aman walking over, he smiled faintly and said, God Aman, I heard that your disciple Gabriel has achieved transcendence and eternal life not long ago. Congratulations, you can now create your own divine clan. Aman said non-committally. This was one of my vows in the past, to create an ideal divine clan. Ea looked at the gods below the stairs again and said, The defeat of the Anunnaki divine clan in the human world is irreversible. If Anu has entrusted you with something important, there is a possibility that all the gods present will be called angels, just like your disciples. The words of the god of wisdom were meaningful. Aman looked back at the gods and replied, This is the choice of the gods, not my decision, isn't it? Ea nodded. Anu is waiting for you, go in quickly. Aman entered the door of the palace. It was difficult to describe the mystery of this door. What he stepped into was not a hall, but a valley surrounded by peaks. On a small hill, there was a boulder that was shaped like a table. The two boulders beside it were like two chairs that seemed to be made by nature. There was a strange scene on the table, and it turned out to be a game of military beast chess. There was already a man sitting on the chair, and he smiled with his back to Amon. "I didn't expect to meet here, Amon, let's play another game." The speaker was Anu. Amon walked around the table and sat down, and finally saw the appearance of this god. He had a beautiful long wavy beard that hung down to his chest, and his hair was also black and shiny like waves that hung down to his shoulders. He wore a golden hairband on his head, and he looked like a very dignified middle-aged man. Amon had never seen him before, but there was a very familiar feeling in his soul. He sat down on the opposite side of the table and said, "Goliath, I didn't expect to meet you here, and I didn't expect you to be Anu." Anu shook his head and said, "You can say that I am Goliath, but Goliath is not me." The two gods looked at each other and smiled, and their eyes contained endless information, but it seemed that there was no need to say more. Anu fused the Book of Destiny, which contained the spiritual imprint and spiritual knowledge, with the divine kingdom, and he himself returned to the mortal world in the form of a new soul. So his current soul was Goliath. But Goliath himself did not know that he was Anu. He was a complete and independent person who had completed his life in the mortal world. When his life ended and he returned to the divine kingdom, he finally understood the whole story. What was the purpose of the Anunnaki divine kingdom's lord doing this? And what did he gain? He may have been trying to break through to a higher realm than the god of creation, may have had a premonition of what the Anunnaki divine clan would face, may have gone to the mortal world with some kind of wish, or may have been trying to confirm another path of cultivation. From the experience of Goliath's life, many things could be explained, but they were all wonderful. Amon looked down at the military chess game on the table. He had played chess with Goliath twice in the mortal world, and he did not expect to see Anu again in the divine kingdom. The brilliance on the chessboard showed the current situation of the war on the continent, and Amon smiled bitterly. "Respected god of creation, you have turned the chessboard upside down." Anu had indeed turned the chessboard upside down, and his position was on the side of Marduk and the Bosnian Empire, while Amon's position was on the other side. Anu waved his hand and said, "Supreme General Amon, you should call me Goliath. I deliberately put the chessboard upside down, wanting you to try if you were me, and see if you could turn the situation around. My attempt to leave the divine kingdom this time, as you can see, ultimately failed." If Anu's purpose was to bypass the test and find another way to surpass the realm of the god of creation, he had indeed failed. If he wanted to prove a completely different path of training, it seemed that he had also failed, because Goliath did not transcend eternal life, but died in battle. If he wanted to stop Marduk's attack on the Anunnaki divine realm in the mortal world, the current situation was even more of a failure. Amon, however, shook his head and said, "For the god of creation who owns the entire world, success and failure do not matter to you. Besides, in this life of Goliath, you have also gained a lot, and leaving the divine kingdom to go to the mortal world was very valuable." Anu also said with emotion, "Yes, I have gained a lot. In this life, Goliath has proven his pursuit. Let's not talk about this for now, let's play chess. In the mortal world, we were also opponents on the battlefield, and you are one of the best commanders I have ever seen. I want to know, if you were me, how would you face the attack of the kingdom of Bosnian?" With a snap of Amon's fingers, the brilliance on the chessboard returned to before the attack of the kingdom of Bosnian, and then the chessboard began to automatically evolve, replaying the situation of the kingdoms of the continent over the past 12 years. As he watched, he said, "King Cyrus of Bosnian used troops unexpectedly, and he chose to go far away, bypassing Assyria and Babylon in both of his attacks. With such a risky move, he first destroyed Hittite." Goliath nodded. "To carry out a war like this is either an idiot or a genius, but it turns out that he is not white nose." Between the kingdom of Bosnian and the Hittite kingdom, there were still two countries, Assyria and Babylon. According to common sense, Cyrus should have conquered Assyria or Babylon first before attacking Hittite. This was common sense that everyone knew. Otherwise, the logistical route of an expedition through a third country would be easily compromised. It was a strategy that could not be used in a large-scale war. But Cyrus of the Kingdom of Bosnian did it, and it was very successful. He wasn't taking any risks, but rather relying on absolute strength and ability. In the north, he first destroyed Elam, established a province, and consolidated the occupied area. After that, he used it as a base to bypass Assyria and attack Hittite. This strategy was stopped by Goliath and the Assyrian Empire. However, the Kingdom of Potsdam's other campaign was even more classic. They inserted their army between Assur and Babylon. First, they joined forces with Babylon to capture 5 city-states. Then they fell out with Babylon and captured the city of Kish, opening up a path for E. Using this as a base, the great general of the Kingdom of Bosnian entered the Hittite kingdom, and finally destroyed this ancient kingdom. The brilliance on the chessboard stopped at this point, and Ammon sighed softly. This game can't be played, Goliath. This is not your fault. If it were me, the result would be the same. You are an excellent commander in the human world, but that Cyrus is not simple, and the army of the Kingdom of Bosnian is stronger. If both sides do not make mistakes, the outcome of Hittite is inevitable. The result of this battle can only be reversed in theory, if one of the armies of either Assyria or Babylon is completely under your command. But in reality, this is impossible. The defeat of this battle is due to Babylon. Ammon waved his hand, and the chessboard changed again, which was equivalent to simulating a new battle. The change on the chessboard was to repel the army of the Kingdom of Bosnian. Ammon demonstrated a hypothesis. If Goliath could command the armies of Hittite and Babylon at the same time, the outcome would be a draw, and the army of the Kingdom of Bosnian would retreat. But this result could only be a hypothesis, and in reality, it could not happen in the human world. Goliath commanded the Hittite army when King Ashur was at his wit's end. How could King Babylon give full command of the army to the commander of another country? Even if Babylon and Hittite could form an alliance to deal with Darius, they would still fail if they did not cooperate well with each other. Moreover, Babylon did not play any role in this battle at all. Marduk sent down an oracle, asking the Kingdom of Babylon to cooperate with the Kingdom of Bosnian to attack Assyria. As a result, the Kingdom of Bosnian occupied 5 city-states and opened the way for the attack. Not only did the Kingdom of Babylon not stop them, they even helped. When the Kingdom of Bosnian attacked the city of Kish, they did not even encounter a decent resistance. At this time, if King Binut mobilized all the troops of the kingdom to cut off the path of retreat of Darius's expeditionary army, there might be a last chance to reverse the situation, but the Kingdom of Babylon did not move. Could it be that King Binut could not see the situation clearly? If Hittite was really destroyed, the same fate would probably fall upon the Kingdom of Babylon. But King Binut was also very helpless. He wanted to attack the army of Bosnian, but he could not get the support of the group of priests in the kingdom. It seemed that the gods had abandoned him. When Darius attacked the city of Kish, Marduk sent down an oracle, saying that as long as they did not resist the army of Bosnian, the gods would protect them, and they would not lose their original wealth and status. And it was true. The priests were still the priests, the nobles were still the nobles, and the shrines were still the shrines. It was just that the city of Kish had become the territory of the Kingdom of Bosnian. Marduk's oracle was equivalent to abolishing the threat of the Kingdom of Babylon. Darius could march calmly from the south, and Cyrus had attracted the main force of Hittite from the north. How could they fight this war? Anu looked at the chessboard and sighed. What Enlil failed to do with the help of Sinek, Marduk did it with the help of the Kingdom of Bosnian. Now that Hittite is destroyed, what do you think the fate of Babylon and Assyria will be? The situation on the chessboard was very interesting. Originally, Hittite was in the west, Bosnian was in the east, and Babylon and Assyria were in the middle. But now that Hittite was destroyed, the Kingdom of Bosnian not only established the province of Elam in the north of Assyria, but also established a new province between Assyria and Babylon. The territory of the Assyrian Empire had shrunk to the territory before Seneca's expansion, and became a kingdom within a kingdom that was completely surrounded by Bosnian. Babylon was also surrounded by the Kingdom of Bosnian on 3 sides, and the other side was the sea, cutting off the land connection with the outside world. If the Kingdom of Bosnian completely digested the newly established province and the situation stabilized, the 2 kingdoms would have no choice but to surrender. Ammon pointed to the chessboard and said, Hittite is destroyed, And if the kingdom of Bosnian can stabilize the new territory without internal strife, then Assyria will definitely be destroyed. As for Babylon, Anu curled his lips and said, Babylon doesn't need to fight. Marduk will send down an oracle to open the city and surrender. You should be able to guess that the god that the kingdom of Bosnian believes in is probably another identity of Marduk. Chapter 277. With a snap of Anu's fingers, the colors on the chessboard changed, and the kingdom of Boers annexed Hittite, Yavi and Babylon. On the continent, only the empire of Igut was left to fight against Boers. Then he shook his head and sighed. Marduk defeated Anunnaki, and the next one to face is the Ennead. If the situation continues to develop like this, the empire of Igut will not be a match for Boers. Amon, do you see anything? Amon sighed. Pulling one hair will affect the whole body. Going back in time, the upheaval in the continent was foreshadowed by the pharaohs of Igut II's expedition to Hittite. This period of history was also Amon's personal experience on Earth, and it accompanied him as he grew up. In a sense, if it had not been for II's expedition, and the timely recommendation of Amon by the adoratress Maria as the head of the legion, giving him the opportunity to establish meritorious deeds and rescue his people, Amon would not have become what he is today. That war foreshadowed the decline of the empire of Igut from prosperity to prosperity, and Hittite took the opportunity to escape the fate of submitting to Igut, and the appearance of Amon could be said to have turned the tide for the defeated empire of Igut. The real protagonists of that war were not the pharaohs of Igut II and King Lucier of Hittite, but Amon and Goliath, and perhaps also Gilgamesh and Enkidu. Many things happened after that, and although Goliath made achievements on the battlefield, his actions were tantamount to preventing a larger war between the countries of the continent. The next most important thing was the rise of the Assyrian Empire, and the expansion of great Emperor Sinek, whose purpose was not only to conquer Babylon but also to annex the plains of Duk. It could be clearly seen that Enlil was behind all this. This god wanted to use Emperor Shinika's ambition to completely defeat Markik and complete the unification of the Anunnaki divine realm. But this plot was thwarted with the assassination of Sinak, and even Enlil himself was eventually killed by Marduk. On the other hand, Marduk took this opportunity to break through to a higher level and left the Anunnaki divine clan. Seneka's conquest not only indirectly contributed to the rapid rise of the kingdom of Potsdam, but it also severely weakened the power of Babylon and Assur. Babylon lost 6 city-states, and although the Assur Empire was strong for a time, it had overdrawn its future power and sowed the seeds of decline. In this series of changes, Goliath's figure could always be seen turning the tide. No matter how well Goliath did, he still failed in the end. This was not Goliath's failure, but the overall decline of the countries of the continent, among which the only one that remained strong was Hittite. So it was not unreasonable for the kingdom of Potsdam to go far and conquer Hittite first. Once Hittite was destroyed, the countries of the continent would no longer be able to compete with Potsdam. Anu, however, pointed to the empire of Igut on the chessboard and shook his head. I am not talking about the beginning of a war on earth, but about the wishes of the gods. If Hittite, Assur, and Babylon are all destroyed, Potsdam will become an unprecedented great empire, and what Cyrus achieved was even greater than Seneka's ambitions. If he advances and defeats Igut, the divine realm of the Ennead will also be annexed by Marduk. Does such a situation remind you of a legend? Amon frowned. Could it be the legend of the god of the gods? When the plains of Duk become a fertile land again, the god of the gods will be born. Anu nodded. Yes. What Enlil did, what Marduk is doing now, and even Seth's ambitions back then, are more or less related to the legendary god of the gods. And the struggle between the countries of the continent also revolves around the plains of Duk. And the original purpose of Lazith II's expedition was to seize the plains of Duk. The gods have the purposes of the gods, and the kings and kingdoms of the world also have their own ambitions and desires, either guided by the gods or in the name of the gods. Amon asked in confusion. Of course I have heard of this legend, but how did it first come down to us? Anu let out a long sigh. It is a prophecy left behind by a god before she fell. She was the first god to be forced to kill herself since the creation of the divine clans of the continent, Tiamat, who fell in the War of the Gods. Amon was slightly taken aback. This is Tiamat's last words. I don't know its origin, not even Murin. Tiamat's last words were not left in vain. And although she was forced to kill herself, Enril, the leader of the strategists who forced her, could also be said to have been killed by this prophecy 1,000 years later. I just find it strange. As a god who transcends eternal life, would she still believe in such a prophecy? Anu imprinted a message in Amon's soul, which was the desolate voice that echoed between heaven and earth when Tiamat was forced to kill herself 1,000 years ago. O gods before me, how ridiculous you are, turning this wilderness into a scorched wasteland. It symbolizes the fallen gods, and it also symbolizes your fate. You have seized the realm of the source of divine power, and think that it is the victory of the gods, but such a divine clan will also be buried like the gods. I leave today, when this wilderness is rejuvenated and becomes fertile again. The god of the gods will come, and the continent will no longer have such divine clans and gods like you. Everything is over. I bid you farewell. Enril, my fate today is your future. There are still unknown achievements above the gods, and the gods will no longer be the gods. Anu relayed Tiamat's prophecy and sighed again. This prophecy doesn't matter whether you believe it or not. Amon, you are also a god, and the prophecy of the gods is not the nonsense of mortals. Tiamat was the first god to kill herself since there were gods in the continent, and I once gave her the Book of Destiny, hoping that she could replace me as the lord of the divine kingdom. At that time, her achievements were infinitely close to the god of creation. But she was thinking about whether she could seek a higher realm, a realm beyond the god of creation. And the war of the gods broke out at that time, and she fell. Her prophecy only pointed out a path, the possible change and destination of the divine clan at that time. So the fulfillment of this prophecy was not to prove the truth of Tiamat's words, but the self-verification of the gods. Amon said thoughtfully, yes. At that time, no one knew what realm and achievements were above the god of creation, and what methods could be used to verify it. So the prophecy of the god of the gods became a way. And Tiamat was at least right about one thing. She did have a higher achievement than the god of creation. And now Zeus and Marduk have verified this. And looking at what Marduk did, he wanted to continue to verify the god of the gods in the prophecy. Anu, however, looked at him and shook his head gently. Now it is not only Zeus and Marduk who have proven themselves beyond the realm of the god of creation, but also you, Amon. Amon smiled bitterly. I have indeed broken through the realm of the god of creation, but I am still in the midst of a muddled search, and there are still many questions I would like to ask you. I am not sure about Marduk's situation, but I have not verified the achievements of Zeus. I heard that he created the kingdom of Olympus, not only merging the world of the previous god of creation, but also often leaving the divine realm to wander around. Anu waved his hand. You want to ask me for advice? I also want to ask you for advice. These are exactly what I am interested in. The kingdom of Olympus created by Zeus was able to merge the divine realm of the previous god of creation. And if anyone can do it, it should be you. Amon shook his head. I don't know if I can do it, at least not yet. Anu leaned forward and said, how did you seek confirmation and breakthrough? Can you tell me your secret? Amon smiled. If someone else had asked me, I wouldn't have answered. Firstly, it's because the level of accumulation and attainment in my soul have not reached that level, so it's useless to answer. Secondly, it's because I don't have to tell unrelated people. But if you ask, I will not hold back, not only because I have obtained the scroll of destiny, but also because you are Goliath. He reached out and pointed between Anu's eyebrows, and the ancient god of creation closed his eyes and fell into contemplation, as if experiencing and recalling something, and a look of realization and regret appeared on his face. Amon's voice was heard again. The end of human desires is the achievement of the god of creation. If this is what you seek, this path is the end of the search for the gods, and there is no higher realm. After a long time, Anu finally opened his eyes and said, if it is the right path, the god of creation is indeed the end. If there is a higher realm of pursuit, the search for the god of creation is a wrong path. The meaning of this sentence was a bit complicated. The cultivation of the gods was similar to the cultivation of the human world in a sense. There may be only a few right paths to immortality in the human world, but there were countless wrong paths. After becoming a god, according to the guidance of the existing pantheon, the god of creation was the end of the achievement of the gods. But in the eyes of Amon, it was equivalent to a fork in the road, and there was no way to go forward. If the pursuit of becoming a god was like this, then it did not matter if it was a fork in the road. If the pursuit of the god of creation was regarded as the right path, then this was the end of the achievement, with the world and pantheon that one had created. The achievements of the god of creation were higher than those of the creator, and of course, they had to pay more. The earliest Anu and Anu had the vow to create a divine kingdom and guide the gods and establish a pantheon, and they had sought to prove this realm. Since they had established a pantheon, there was a promise and a responsibility to give the gods a divine kingdom that they yearned for. Anu murmured, "Is it that simple? A mistake of a thought?" Amon nodded. "It's that simple, just a thought. Because of the different vows, my current achievements did not surpass yours or Anu's, but I have embarked on another path, and I am still in the process of exploring it." Anu lowered his head and muttered to himself, "But I can't be considered to have taken a wrong path, because I am the creator. Back then, I sought to prove a higher achievement than the creator. There was no god who could guide me on what it should be, and I became the creator." Amon comforted him. "You finally understand today that this path has come to an end. If I hadn't witnessed a pantheon like Anunnaki and had a different vow in my soul, maybe I would have reached your point." Anu said sadly, "I finally know the answer. The choice back then was only a thought, and it is impossible for me to make a new choice. It's like playing chess, the piece has been decided, and there is no way to go back on it." What were these two talking about? If it were an ordinary god, he would probably not understand. Amon told Anu through his own experience that if he wanted to pursue a higher realm than the god of creation, he should not have become the god of creation that he is today in his vow. Amon had established a divine kingdom in an indestructible eternity, and had already achieved the same achievement as Anu. But he did not have the vow to become such a god of creation at all, so he simply gave up on the divine kingdom. Amon had witnessed the pantheon of today, and understood the pursuit of the gods and the achievements and realms they had achieved, which was why he had made such a vow. But Anu was different back then. He was a pioneer, and he broke through the achievements of the creator to become a god of creation. He did not want to give up at all, nor did he know that there was another path after giving up. So both gods said, "Let's just do it." But was it really that simple? To have a world of one's own creation, to guide the gods who transcend eternal life to establish a pantheon, and enjoy an eternal divine kingdom. And as the pantheon grew stronger, the knowledge of cultivation would continue to merge, and this divine kingdom would become more and more colorful. In theory, the growth was unlimited, so who would give up and not even try? This was a choice that could only be made with a firm vow and a strong soul. In terms of current achievements alone, Amon did not surpass Anu, but he had opened another door and could continue to seek a higher realm. As for whether it would be the same achievement as Zeus, it was not clear at present. There was no visible path ahead, and the only way out was to walk. Anu knew the answer from Amon. He sighed and said, "It's a pity that I can't turn back." But Amon shook his head. There is nothing that can't be turned back. When people say this, they are often measuring how great the price is, whether they can bear it or are they willing to bear it. The greatest price people can pay is everything they have. Anu nodded and said, "Yes, this truth is simple. Give up the divine kingdom, and the creator can leave. It is possible for you, but you did not make such a vow to create such a pantheon, and you did not make such a promise. If I make this vow to destroy the Anunnaki divine kingdom, because of the promise of creating a pantheon, I will also be destroying myself at the same time, which is tantamount to killing myself like Tiamat." Amon also sighed. "Yes, you wanted to know the answer I sought, but you did not expect it to be this kind of answer, did you? If you make such a vow, it is tantamount to destroying the Anunnaki divine kingdom, and it is tantamount to your own death. And you are now the king of the Anunnaki divine kingdom, and the pantheon of Anunnaki still exists, the gods can continue to guide the divine emissaries, and the lost divine realm may one day be restored. Anu looked at Amon, and gradually smiled again. Suddenly he blinked and said, "Actually, I have another choice, but this choice requires your help, and the reason why I came to you is also related to this." Amon: "Oh, how can I help you?" Anu: "If one day you can prove the realm similar to Zeus, you can create your own world, integrate it with the Anunnaki divine kingdom, and retain and inherit everything. At that time, the Anunnaki divine kingdom will still exist, but it will be integrated into your divine kingdom, and the gods will become angels who believe in Ammonius, and it will not be counted as me breaking the promise of creating a pantheon, and I can make an oath to prove it again." Amon was slightly surprised. "You actually think so? But do you know, even if I am willing to help you, how many conditions must be met? Not to mention whether Amon was willing to help Anu. If he could really do this, then the conditions needed to be met would be unimaginably complex even for the gods. First, for Amon to have such an achievement, he must be able to do it one day. Second, the gods of Anunnaki must also be willing to become angels who accept the guidance of Amon. Third, Amon must be able to guide the gods to a higher realm on another path. Fourth, Anu must also make a successful breakthrough, and make a vow to prove a certain realm, which even Amon could not help him with. At least for now, Anu could not do this, and even Amon did not know how Anu should practice and prove himself in order to take this step. Anu said, "Of course I know that it is difficult to fulfill this wish, and it seems impossible. But when you were a child in Duk, could you have imagined that you would become the Ammonius of today? Before becoming a god, you have already made a different vow, so the integration of the Anunnaki divine kingdom can be included in your vow to continue forward. I just want to ask, to make an agreement with you. When it can be realized in the future, please integrate with my divine kingdom, and help me continue to fulfill my promise to guide the gods to enjoy the eternal divine kingdom. And you are not without gain, you will enjoy and inherit the Anunnaki divine kingdom, and what I give up will also be what you gain." Amon said thoughtfully, "Why do you want to do this? As a god of creation, you don't have to do this at all." This question was also very reasonable, and in a sense, Anu's idea was completely unnecessary. Many of the gods living in the eternal divine kingdom did not pursue a higher realm, and even if they did, it would be to become a creator or a god of creation. With an eternal world created by a soul, was there any need to pursue anything else? Even if Anu did nothing, even if the divine realm of the Anunnaki divine clan on earth was completely occupied by Marduk, the Anunnaki divine kingdom would still exist, and Anu would not lose anything. In the long years of history, the world had risen and fallen, and the kingdom of Bos could not be so strong forever, and the people could not always believe in Marduk as the main god, so there was still hope of restoring the divine realm. Anu, on the other hand, had to give up everything he had and start all over again. Amon could only help him continue to fulfill his promise to the gods, but Anu himself had to take the risk of dying, and even the path of seeking proof was unknown. So why bother? Anu replied very calmly, "Because my wish has been made." This sentence broke through thousands of words, and Amon had nothing more to say. However, Anu asked Amon in return, "If you want to know why I have such a wish, this is a question that the gods of creation cannot answer, but you can ask yourself. Why did you make such a vow back then? Not to become a god of creation like me, not to establish a divine clan like the Anunnaki." Chapter 278. Goliath had already found a way to leave the divine kingdom, which was to refine the scroll of destiny and go to the mortal world in the form of a new soul. But no matter how many times he went back and forth in this way, there was one fact that could not be changed, and that was that the divine kingdom was still the same, and it was nothing more than more colorful because of the growth of his knowledge. In the eyes of the world, Goliath was close to perfection, and his achievements in almost all aspects had reached the pinnacle that a mortal could achieve. Even if Anu did the same thing many times, the possibility of the new god surpassing Goliath in the mortal world was very small. Moreover, even if Goliath succeeded, it would be nothing more than to recover the former divine realm of the Anunnaki, and restore the divine clan to what it was before the War of the Gods broke out, which was no different from Enlil's purpose. Hearing Amon's words, Anu nodded repeatedly and said, "The death of Goliath made me realize one thing. When I was on earth as Goliath, I did not want such a divine clan in my heart. It was a betrayal of myself, and I brought this heart back to the divine kingdom. Becoming Goliath in the mortal world was my greatest gain in the past 1,000 years, and when I returned to the divine kingdom with Goliath's heart, there was no need to do the same thing. Thank you for telling me what you have verified, so I hope to make an agreement with you." Amon asked again, "But why did you come to me?" Anu looked at Amon, asked a series of questions and answered himself. "Who else can I go to besides you? Who has such a realm nowadays? Do you want me to find Marduk's and Zeus here? Even if they are willing, I am not willing. Even if I am willing, the Anunnaki gods are not willing, who refined and fused the scroll of destiny, absorbing the spiritual imprint and cultivation knowledge of the Anunnaki's founding, who can give the Anunnaki another kind of guidance, and make them listen to it. Only you, Amon, Murin and Peloponnes will undoubtedly support you, and Nergal and Kela will also be subdued by you. People like Nanner and you two do not care about the affairs of the world. They just want to enjoy peace in their eternal kingdom. As long as you can integrate this kingdom and continue my promise, they will not object. Most importantly, the God of wisdom, Ea, was also the wisest. He knew what choice to make. After the fall of Enlil and the departure of Marduk, you killed Adado and Adad. In fact, you have already conquered this pantheon. You did all these things on your own. At that time, I was still in the human world as Goliath. If not, how could I make such a request to you now? Your appearance and actions are also an opportunity for me to make this vow." It was hard to tell whether Amon wanted to cry or laugh. He put his hand on his forehead and said, "Looks like I've really done something to pave the way for you. Now that you have made such a request and wanted to make such an agreement, I could not refuse. But you seem to have come too late. I have already agreed to Anu's conditions. After becoming the creator, I will kill Seth and replace Seth as the king of the Ennead. If Amon joined the Ennead and became the king of the Ennead, it would be theoretically impossible for him to agree to Anu's request." But Anu suddenly laughed. He said with a smile, "Amon, these two things are not contradictory. Now I know why Anu made that condition to you. His thoughts are the same as mine. I created the scroll of destiny, and he created the lotus of the beginning, but they were both reflected in your soul and refined and integrated. If you kill Seth, I am afraid that not only will you become the king of the Ennead, but you will also inherit Anu's promise to the gods of the Ennead. In the divine kingdom you created, the Ennead will be integrated, and Anu will leave." Amon frowned slightly. "Are you so sure?" Anu nodded. "I can be sure. I heard that he agreed to let you kill Seth, so I can be sure. He wants you to integrate the Ennead's divine kingdom, so he must make the gods of the Ennead willing to accept your guidance and worship you as the only god. The only obstacle is Seth. It was you who wanted to remove this obstacle, and Anu will let you remove it." Amon said thoughtfully, "I am not familiar with the gods of the Ennead. I have only seen Horus and Osiris. Even if I kill Seth, these two gods may not listen to my guidance." Anu sneered. "Not necessarily. Don't forget what Seth did. The gods call themselves angels and worship Anu as the only god. Didn't Horus and Osiris also acquiesce? As long as you kill Seth, the only trouble is Osiris, but I think you have a way to subdue this king of the underworld. As for the rest of the gods of the Ennead, they will only respect the will of Anu. And at that time, your will replace the will of Anu." Amon smiled bitterly. "According to what you said, I did these things myself again, because I promised Artemis of the Olympian divine clan that I would take her to the underworld of the Ennead to find trouble with Osiris. My purpose this time is different from going to the underworld of Kela. I don't want to tear down the underworld, I want to subdue Osiris." Anu blinked again and said, "You are the only one who can merge these two divine clans, but Anu and I both have the same idea. At that time, the world you create will merge the Anunnaki divine kingdom and the Ennead divine kingdom. And these two ancient divine clans will continue to exist but also cease to exist, which is equivalent to you replacing me and Anu. The gods will all become so-called angels and worship you as the only god. Think about it. Will this fulfill the prophecy of the god of the gods? Amon frowned again. Do you think I will be the one to fulfill that prophecy? I never thought about it. He pointed to the brilliance on the chessboard again and said, So what did Marduk do? Hittite has been destroyed. Assyria and Jilin are about to be annexed, and the Igut is also inevitable to be conquered. The divine realms of the Anunnaki divine clan and the Ennead divine clan for thousands of years are about to be occupied by Marduk. Why not say that he is the god of the gods? Anu shook his head. He only occupied the divine realm on earth, while you have merged with the divine realm and become the true god of the gods. The rise and fall of kingdoms on earth is hard for anyone to say, but the divine realm is the well of eternity. Amon rested his chin on his hand and looked at the chessboard. I'm thinking about a question. What will the divine realm world created by Marduk look like? Anu narrowed his eyes. I don't know, but I can guess. As you said, the divine kingdoms of the Anunnaki and the Ennead both have the shadow of kingdoms on earth, which can be seen from the divine realms on earth. I have to admit that Marduk was a very remarkable god, and like you, he comprehended the power of origin on his own and transcended eternal life. At the same time, he was also a very interesting god, and his actions were very thought-provoking. Amon nodded lightly. I have seen him, and what he did was indeed very interesting. You are the oldest god of creation in the world. Based on your deduction, what is the situation of the divine realm created by Marduk? Anu pointed to the chessboard and said, Look at what the kingdom of Pots did. It must have been guided by Marduk's oracle. They conquered new territories and established provinces, but allowed the local people to retain their original beliefs, and the nobles and priests to have their original positions. As the kingdom of Pots expanded, its territory contained the beliefs of gods large and small, real and fake, and the belief of the main god of the kingdom of Pots spread throughout the continent with the expansion. Amon was slightly moved. I can also see some traces. If the divine realm on earth represents the reflection of some kind of vow made by Marduk, then the divine realm he established is almost open to all and can accommodate all kinds of different gods, but the spiritual imprints cannot be completely integrated, and it is only a simple accommodation. However much it can hold, Marduk will be able to absorb. Anu. A divine realm created in such a way is indeed very interesting, a place where there are all kinds of wonders. The beliefs of the gods are not compatible with each other, and there are even constant disputes and conflicts. Marduk likes to watch the fun, but such a divine realm cannot accommodate a world with a higher achievement than the Creator. If there is the achievement of the Creator, naturally there is no need to join in the fun. Amon pondered. If Marduk really created such a divine realm, and became the master of such a divine realm, it would also be a very remarkable thing. It seems that he has indeed surpassed the achievements of the Creator. Has his divine realm already been created? Can it really be like this? Anu shook his head. Probably not. Everything that the kingdom of Pots has done to expand on earth is the confirmation of what Marduk has done in his soul. I guess the divine realm in his vow should be like that. Amon looked at the chessboard again and said with a frown, A great empire like Potsdam may be very large when it's strong, but once Potsdam itself declines, it will lose control of its territory and easily fall apart. In my eyes, Goliath is not only an extremely accomplished supreme mage, but also a great strategist and politician. Can't you see this? Anu shook his head again. Of course I can see it, and I believe that Marduk can see it too. But this is the process of Marduk seeking confirmation. If he succeeds in establishing such a divine realm, it will naturally be better for the Pots Empire to be strong for a long time. And it doesn't matter if it declines in history, because Marduk's vow has been fulfilled. Amon finally nodded very seriously. I see, the current situation is a great change that the continent has not seen in 1,000 years. Marduk has his own pursuits, and I have my vow. You and Angela have your own decisions. The purpose of my coming to you was originally to verify the realms of training with you, the ancient god of creation, and to ask for your advice. Anu smiled and said, I will naturally tell you everything I know. My situation is different from Angela's. You only got the reflection of the scroll of destiny from Adato, and today I will tell you everything I know, what I have obtained, and what I have verified. The communication between the gods was very simple, and even the contents of mountains of ancient books on earth could be imprinted into the soul, with just a thought. But it took quite a bit of effort to verify such a huge amount of information between Amon and Anu. The two talked here for an unknown amount of time, before Amon finally got up and said goodbye. Anu said, "I will wait for you here, and when I see you again, I am afraid it will be the last time we meet, and by then you will have merged with the Ennead. Are you going to kill Seth now?" Amon shook his head. "I have to go to the human world first, and go to the Garden of Eden to meet the disciples. There is one thing to remind you, Raphael and Walter have now been rescued by my disciples and brought back to the Garden of Eden. You have returned to the divine realm. Do you want to continue to guide them?" Anu shook his head. "For them, Goliath is dead. When I was Goliath, I asked you to continue to guide my two students, and left them these last words. Since I am going to hand over the divine realm to you, the gods here will also listen to your guidance, and that naturally includes them." It took 3 years for Amon and Anu to meet in the human world. At this moment, it had been a total of 15 years since he last left the human world, and the disciples in the Garden of Eden finally saw the return of Amon. When Amon returned to the Garden of Eden, he was accompanied by the two goddesses, Murin and Peloponnes. Among the disciples who were reborn, Gabriel took the opportunity to escape eternal life. But Amon did not guide her into the divine realm like he did when he created it. So Gabriel remained in the Garden of Eden. For the disciples of Amon, there was one thing that was different from the other divine clans. In the Anunnaki or the Ennead, if a divine emissary became a god who transcended eternal life, his status would also change. But in the Garden of Eden, Madanza was still the leader of the disciples, and Gabriel was only the most accomplished angel at present, because they only believed in one God. When Amon returned this time, there were 3 more guests in the Garden of Eden, namely Raphael, Walter, and Cilia. When Goliath organized the last remnants of the army to fight the army of boars, these 3 were also in the army. Hittite was defeated and Goliath was killed. They were also prepared to fight to the last moment, but were rescued in the melee. Of course, Siegel was going to save Cilia, Elmar was going to save Raphael, and Rulio went together. It was not easy to take these 3 supreme mages away by force, but at that time they were exhausted from the battle, and Walter was seriously injured. The 3 divine emissaries suddenly descended from the sky, and took them away from the heavy encirclement of Bor's army. Since Amon's divine emissaries intervened, Marduk's divine emissaries would also come forward to stop them. At that time, Amon was in the eternal realm, opening up a lonely space and time to guard Gabriel's recovery. And when he noticed the situation, he immediately asked Gabriel to return to Earth to cover and support the 3 disciples. Gabriel was already a god, and although she appeared on the battlefield, she did not directly intervene in the battle between the 2 sides, and only rescued a few people. It was not convenient for the divine emissaries on Marduk's side to expand the conflict. When Amon returned to the Garden of Eden, Madanzo and Gabriel led the disciples to welcome him. The disciples once again saw Peloponnes, who had helped them build the Garden of Eden, and now had become a true god, the Anunnaki goddess of spring and life, and they all came forward to congratulate her. Peloponnes replied with a smile, "You don't have to call me goddess, maybe it won't be long before I become an angel guided by Amon like you." The Anunnaki gods were already clear about Anu's decision and the fate of the Anunnaki divine kingdom, so Peloponnes said that. But the disciples did not know the inside story, and they all looked at Amon with surprise. After not seeing him for 15 years, they heard such shocking news as soon as they returned. What did Ammonius do to Peloponnes? Amon, however, shook his head and said to Peloponnes, "Don't say that yet, because I haven't done it yet." Then he looked around at the disciples and asked, "Why don't I see Walter?" Raphael had a sad look on his face and sighed. Walter was injured and has not fully recovered for the past 3 years, and he always sits alone in the forest without saying a word. The news of your return to the Garden of Eden was so sudden that everyone was in a hurry to see you and forgot about him. I'll go find him now. Gabriel interrupted. There's no need to go find him, I've already asked him to come. Amon looked up and saw Walter walking out of the dense forest in the distance, his figure floating close to the ground in front of him, and he knelt to the ground and kissed the soil in salute. This supreme mage was indeed injured, and he had not recovered for 3 years in the Garden of Eden. Presumably the pain was more in his heart. He helped Walter up and asked, Walter, what's your name? Walter was stunned by Amon's question. This was an idiotic question. Of course his name was Walter. He had imagined countless scenarios when Ammonius returned to Earth, and he had countless questions in his heart to ask this god, most of which were about his teacher Goliath, but he never expected that this god would ask such a question. Seeing Walter in a daze, Ammon explained, I know you are a pure priest, just like your teacher Goliath, who has never married in his life. From the moment he accepted the priesthood, he dedicated everything to the gods and no longer used the family name and title. But you should know that Goliath's faith has long since turned his back on the main god of the shrine. And I'm afraid you are the same now. I want to ask your original name. Walter bowed his head and replied, My name is Saria. At this moment, a piece of information was suddenly imprinted in his soul, which was the ins and outs of Goliath, as well as the many contents of the conversation between Ammon and Anu in the divine kingdom. Then he heard Ammon's voice whisper, Saria, I know that the pain in your heart has not yet subsided, and I am also sad for Goliath, but this kind of sadness and regret should not confuse you. About Anu and Goliath, you will understand after you transcend eternal life, and I did not intend to tell you. But seeing you now, I cannot untie the knot in your heart if I don't tell you. Goliath not only hopes that I can guide you, but also hopes that I can merge with the divine kingdom of Anunnaki. This is not a sentence. It is a change of faith. What you are willing to do does not mean that you can do it. If you can accept my guidance, I will call you by this name from now on. Walter looked up and said, My God, please give me guidance. From today onwards, I am Saria in the Garden of Eden. Chapter 279. 260. The years of missing Satan. Zeliah and Raphael officially became disciples in the Garden of Eden, and Celia also entered the Garden of Eden at the same time. The Hittite kingdom had been destroyed, and Celia naturally did not want to go back. Ammon convened the disciples this time to talk about the latest changes in the situation on the continent, and he was going to Erod to kill Seth next, and he did not know how long he would be gone, so there were some things in the human world that had to be taken care of first. The kingdom of Pots was now unstoppable, and the destruction of the Assyrian Empire seemed unstoppable, so Salem would face the same situation as the Assyrian Empire, completely surrounded by the territory of the kingdom of Pots. What should be done now? Ammonius needed to give an oracle. Ammonius told the disciples that the god that the kingdom of Pots believed in, no matter what his name was actually Marduk. He and Marduk had made an agreement many years ago that as long as he did not provoke him first, Marduk and his divine emissaries could not attack him, nor interfere with the choices of the people of Salem. In that case, the fate of Salem lay in the choice of Salem, and what the disciples of God guarded was only the faith left by Ammon, and there was no need to intervene in more things. Moses also asked Ammon on behalf of the Dushians. Of the 12 judges, Othniel, Ehud and Gideon, all now had high-level achievements and were about to face the test of losing their power. Ammon had promised to guide them as Allah, and their faith had been firm and pure for many years. Could he guide them into the Garden of Eden and become official disciples? Ammon sighed to himself. The Dushians had thrived in such a dangerous living environment for thousands of years, practicing the skills of mining for generations, and the accumulation of their bloodline was indeed an extremely high talent. Of the 60 or so surviving clansmen, in addition to Moses and David, who had awakened the power of their origin, there were also the 12 judges who had awakened the power of two sides. Out of the 12 judges, 3 had already died in battle, and out of the remaining 9, 3 of them had already attained high-tier achievements. This was a shocking ratio. They were the essence of this clan that had been accumulated for thousands of years, and the most outstanding representative was, of course, Ammon. There were so many high achievers among just a few dozen people. Of course, it had something to do with the talent they inherited in their bloodlines. There were also 3 more important reasons. First, it was the skills they had practiced since they were young. Second, it was the experience of hardship. Third, it was the guidance of geniuses like Amon and his disciples. However, although their descendants were much luckier than their ancestors, it was difficult for them to repeat such amazing achievements. Although the talents in their bloodline would still be inherited, the environment they lived in was completely different. They would no longer have to go through generations of cruel elimination in a closed town like their ancestors, nor would they have to go through so many hardships like the previous generation. Nowadays, the people of the town of Duk had become the new nobles of Salem, owning the best land and mines and living a wealthy and comfortable life. Many of the next generation no longer practiced the mining skills of their ancestors, because it was very hard. Most of them had become mine owners and wealthy merchants, and they no longer had to work personally to mine or open the ore cores. In fact, the mining skills of the town of Duk and the guidance of the origin power had been taught by Amon since the day of the founding of the city of Salem, awakening the power for the right people. The shrine of Ammonius and the shrine of Allah in Salem usually performed this duty. Whether people could obtain this luck depended not only on their talent, but also on their own luck and efforts. Amon told Moses, "No matter what identity I leave the guidance in, it also contains faith, power, and thinking, and the secret of transcendence and eternal life is in it, but it will never be revealed. Whoever awakens this power and has pure faith can receive the guidance of the Garden of Eden. And that is your duty." Moses bowed and said, "My God, I understand. I will guide them to the Garden of Eden." Amon then instructed, "They can come to the Garden of Eden and pursue the realm of transcendence and eternal life, or they can return to the cities on earth and continue to perform their duties in their original identities. They will know who I am when they come here, but they do not have to tell the people of Salem and my people, because my guidance does not change because of my name. This is the test I left for the world." Amon said this not only to Moses, but also to the rest of the disciples. The guidance he left on earth contained the path of the origin power, but because people had different aptitudes, they may be awakened in magic, body arts, or the power of 2 sides. There was no difference in the guidance itself, it only depended on the recipient of the guidance, and any power that was cultivated to a high level could be verified by the origin power again, and embark on the path of transcendence and eternal life. After giving these instructions, Amon took out 2 more divine artifacts, a horn and the sword he had always carried with him, the Eye of Sealing. He handed the horn to Raphael and said, "The divine kingdom I want to create is called Heaven, and the name of this divine artifact is called the Horn of Heaven. You have used it before, so you know what magic it has, and today I will give it to you, my disciple Raphael." Raphael knelt on the ground and took the Horn of Heaven. Amon then said to Sariah, "Continuing to guide you is my promise to Goliath. This sword has always been my weapon, symbolizing the power of guarding faith, and today I will give it to you, my disciple Sariah." The rest of the disciples showed envy and slight surprise, and Sariah, who did not fully understand the sword, knelt down and took it. Amon looked around at the disciples and took out the chariot of 7 winds. When he first got the chariot, he originally wanted to give it to Seagull, but now for some reason he changed his mind and said to George, "You used to be a friend of Nietzsche, and when I was in the human world, you became my friend again, helped me a lot, and then followed me." This chariot of 7 winds symbolizes the victory of the gods, and also symbolizes becoming a different god. It is the trophy of the first god I killed with my own hands. You are the high priest of the temple of Isis, and it symbolizes that you have transcended your original faith and received another kind of guidance. Today I will give it to you, my disciple George. This was not the time to be modest. Amon's words were the will of the gods. Although he knew how precious and powerful this artifact was, George still accepted it. Finally, Amon took out the shadow-chasing lamp and said to Celia, "This shadow-chasing lamp used to be an artifact of the shrine, and it can trace the traces left behind by all kinds of messages and find the right path. However, the mages who once held it went astray. You are the princess of the Hittite kingdom, and now the Hittite kingdom is gone. It symbolizes the guidance of the path, so don't be confused about the future. Today I will give it to you, my disciple Celia. This shadow-chasing lamp was originally a precious artifact in the human world. Later, after being refined by Link, it appeared on many important occasions. When Amon became a god, he used his divine power to completely reforge it. As long as it left a mark on someone's soul, the shadow-chasing lamp would be able to find their traces at any time. It became a divine artifact that could change according to the body and mind. Gabriel already had the Blade of Order. Madanzo had the Key of Fate. Link had Adad's Whip. Raphael had the Horn of Heaven. Kalia had the Eye of Sealing. George had the Chariot of Seven Winds. And Celia had the shadow-chasing lamp. These were all divine artifacts, and some of them, such as the Chariot of Seven Winds, still needed to be refined. Of the remaining disciples, Moses had inherited the iron staff made by Crazy Ol, while Elmar, Rulio, and Seagull, the three disciples, Amon had nothing. Of course, the three of them would not complain, but Amon smiled and took the initiative to explain to them. Faith comes with power, and the weapons I give to the disciples will also be holy artifacts to guard heaven in the future, but the three of you did not receive them. It's not that I'm biased, but I no longer have a god artifact in my hands. On the other hand, you were born as demons, so your strongest weapon is yourselves. Although the path of cultivation you've experienced is much more difficult and long than others, you can use your natural talents to forge your own god artifacts. Amon made such arrangements in the Garden of Eden, which meant that he was going to hand over all the affairs of the human world to his disciples. He was going to kill Seth in the future, create heaven, and merge the Ennead and the Anunnaki divine kingdoms, and no one knew how long it would take. After the disciples had dispersed, Unamna said worriedly, Amon, you have given the disciples powerful weapons, so I can understand that you are worried about them, but you are not even leaving the Chariot of the Seven Winds and the Eye of Sealing, and you are going to kill Seth without a weapon. Are you really that confident? Amon nodded. Yes, that is what I am going to do. Peloponnes said. You are worried about the disciples on earth, but I am worried about you. Amon smiled and said, even if I am worried about them, they have to leave, and they have everything they have to face. Even if you are worried about me, I have to face it. Not bringing these weapons is just a confirmation for me, and it has nothing to do with killing Seth. Namna added, the life of the gods is eternal, and waiting is nothing to me. But you have made arrangements for everyone. But have you forgotten that Wendy is still in the Rose Garden? She is not a god who has transcended eternal life, nor has she passed the test of endless life. Although under the care of me, the goddess of youth and love, she has maintained her youth and is happily waiting for you in the Rose Garden. If even you don't know how long it will take, shouldn't you go see her first? Amon looked at Namna with a little surprise. I was just about to talk about this matter and go to the Rose Garden to see Wendy first. I didn't expect you to remind me. Namna glared at him. Of course I have to remind you on her behalf. 15 years have passed in the human world, and she has even forgotten about time in the carefree Rose Garden, which is filled with the most beautiful flowers in the world, just waiting for you to admire them. Amon thought for a moment and said, with my current ability, although I can't let her transcend eternal life, I can turn a few days into decades in her soul. Since you mentioned Wendy, I thought of another person. I left a different guidance in his soul. All these years he has been calling me nonstop. Before I leave the human world, I should go and do something. Who was this person Amon was talking about? It was the imperial teacher of Asur Faust. In the 15 years that Amon left the human world, Faust's status in the Asur Empire was getting higher and higher. In this great empire that was about to decline, the power and prestige he had reached the peak, almost to the extent that he could do whatever he wanted. But the imperial teacher did not get what he wanted. In his heart he did not even get anything. With the invasion of Pots, the decline and even destruction of the Asur Empire seemed inevitable, but Faust's status and prestige rose with the decline of the Asur Empire. People even saw him as the last hope to save Asur, which made Faust feel the greatest entanglement and depression in his life. His experience and fate all these years had to be told from the beginning. Faust received Satan's guidance and could make himself younger and more handsome, and he did it very cleverly. After returning to the capital of Nepal, every time he appeared in public, there was only a slight change in his appearance. The white hair on his temples gradually turned gray, and the wrinkles on his forehead gradually became shallow. People could see the miracles that happened to the imperial teacher, but it was not too abrupt. 3 years later, the wrinkles on the imperial teacher's face had smoothed out, and his hair had become black and shiny, but there were a few strands of silver at his temples that symbolized wisdom. Not only had his appearance become younger, but he had also become handsome with a hint of might, with a hint of elegance in his might. With Faust's age and experience, he naturally would not be foolish enough to change his appearance into that of a young man. Instead, he displayed his youth and vigor, yet still had the bearing that a sage imperial tutor should have, which made him appear extremely charming. Gradually, a song spread among the people of the Asur Empire. Who is the most knowledgeable person in the whole empire? Of course it's Faust. Who is the most powerful person in the whole empire? It's also Faust. Who is the most handsome and charming person in the empire? It's still Faust. This was a miracle. Only with the blessing of the gods could such a thing happen. Although the supreme warriors could maintain the strength of their bloodline, and the supreme mages could maintain their energy, which allowed them to live longer and appear younger than their actual age, no one had ever heard of anyone having the power to restore their youth. But Faust did it, and he became the idol of the Asur Empire. People worshipped him, respected him, and even loved him. There was no shortage of handsome men in the world, but Faust was the imperial teacher, the most knowledgeable person in the empire, the high priest with the highest achievements in magic, and at the same time, he also had such charm. The significance of him became completely different. Because of this, his reputation was even higher than when he was risking his life for the empire, which made people speechless. If someone spoke ill of Faust in a tavern, they might be beaten up by his admirers, and even if they were beaten up, they would not be able to find a place to reason with. This was not a joke, but the reality of the Asur Empire today. Faust's status was already the chief high priest of the empire, second only to the empress, and his prestige could not be any greater. People believed that the imperial teacher had mastered the highest achievements in the world, and was favored by the gods. He was chosen by the gods in the world, and was a role model for the people of the world. With Faust's charm, he might be able to conquer any girl in the empire and move the hearts of all women, but there was one exception, and that was Empress Samir. On the surface, Samir was a 9th-level supreme warrior, but she also understood the power of the origin. It was just that she focused on the practice of martial arts, and in front of the world, she appeared as a supreme warrior. Although she did not know what kind of secret arts Faust had practiced, she knew that the imperial teacher must have done it by some means. He must have been guided by the gods. Faust's betrayal of Enril could be concealed from others, but not from Samir. The collapse of Adado's statue was not because he did not want to stay in Enril, but because the god had fallen. Samir knew this in her heart. A person who had betrayed the gods, but was still the chief high priest of the empire. He represented the gods in reading oracles to the people, and also represented the people in offering sacrifices to the gods. At the same time, he also practiced the power guided by another god. These were Faust's secrets, and Samir had never asked, because she also had her own secrets. But when she saw Faust, the feeling in her heart could not be the same as the people of the empire. Faust's prestige, in a sense, was also a potential threat to the position of the empress, but Samir was not worried that Faust could threaten her throne or her own safety, and Faust had repeatedly expressed his support and love for the empress in public and in private. So Samir did not change her attitude towards Faust. For her, an unchanged attitude was the greatest tolerance. But this was not the result that Faust wanted. He wanted to conquer the heart of the empress and obtain the love of the empress. As long as Samil wasn't a fool, she would be able to sense Faust's desire through various hints and confessions. However, Samil didn't have the heart to do so. No matter how old and handsome Faust was, he couldn't arouse the love in her heart. She understood Faust more than anyone else in the empire. Perhaps it was because she understood him that she could not find him cute. Faust was her most important assistant in governing the empire, but an assistant did not necessarily become a lover. Faust had awakened his youth and vitality, becoming the most charming man in the empire, but he did not get what he wanted. This made him even more depressed. What was the point of all these achievements? If it was only to fulfill a man's desire, it did not matter what kind of woman he had in the empire. In the lonely long night, Faust thought of a girl. It was the girl who had accompanied him for many nights when he was in disguise in a large brothel a few years ago. She looked a little like Samir. Chapter 280. The girl had long since left the brothel. Faust had disappeared after injuring someone in the brothel. The person he injured was a young officer who had just returned from the front lines. The soldiers who came to seek revenge couldn't find Faust, so they went to the brothel. They smashed the door, tore down 2 of the rooms, and injured several guards. The brothel was the property of the Alpha family, the prime minister of the empire. The incident happened during the state funeral of Emperor Shinnok, so the officer who caused the trouble was severely punished. Due to his military exploits, he wasn't thrown into prison. Instead, he was demoted and had to pay a large sum of money. This was more or less an opportunity for the Alpha family to establish their power. The impulsive officer became the unlucky one, and the girl was also implicated. The girl spent a large sum of money to help the officer compensate. This money was the parangons that Faust had generously given to the girl. The girl left the brothel, and it was said that she was going to marry the officer who had been demoted. This could be considered a good ending. However, the officer didn't marry her. Or rather, he didn't have the time to marry her. He accepted the girl's money and brought her home. He was immediately sent to the front lines. This officer was a 6th-level warrior. Although he had lost his position, he still played an important role on the battlefield. He was highly regarded by the commander of the corps. He continued to command a squad of cavalry, and if he made contributions, he might be able to restore his glory. The officer went to the front lines, and the girl stayed at the officer's house. No one knew if the officer truly wanted to marry the girl, but he did take a large sum of money from the girl to escape prison. He also agreed to marry her. The girl paid the officer for the loss of the brothel, and the remaining half was given to the officer to support his family, so that he wouldn't have to worry about his family at the front lines. This officer was born in a low-level noble family without a title or a fief. His family situation was very similar to Metatro's in the past. His father had passed away, and there was only an old mother and a group of servants at home. However, the officer's family, especially his mother, disliked the girl. After the officer left, the old lady didn't treat the girl as a daughter-in-law. She was treated worse than the maids in the family. Even the servants often humiliated and bullied her under the connivance of the mistress. The reason was very simple. The old lady believed that it was because this prostitute had bewitched her son, causing him to commit a crime, and even lose his official position. The girl was the main culprit behind all this. At first, it was because he needed the girl's money to get his son out of prison, so the old lady could not oppose his son's decision. But when the matter was over and the officer went to the front line, how could the family give the girl a good face? How could the old lady be willing to let her son marry a lowly prostitute? Her beauty was also a sin. With Faust's status and means, it was naturally not difficult for him to find out the girl's whereabouts. He could also sneak into the military officer's house to see her without alerting anyone. Only now did the sage imperial tutor know that the girl's real name was Maganlii. The next time Faust saw Maganlii, it was early winter. There was a small breeze blowing in the backyard, and a large wooden tub was piled full of dirty clothes. The girl was sitting beside the wooden tub, washing clothes with her head lowered. Her beautiful hair was wrapped in a worn-out headscarf, and a strand of hair hung on her forehead, shaking rhythmically as she vigorously scrubbed. Her face was still beautiful, and her skin was still so white and delicate, but it could not hide her haggard expression. Her hands were red from the cold water, and many parts of them were cracked. Faust stood opposite the wooden tub and looked at her quietly. An indescribable sadness welled up in his heart. Was it him who caused her to suffer such a fate? But she had never seen Faust, and the incident a few years ago had never happened. So what? Maganlii was weak and kind. Otherwise she would not have used her own money to save that officer, who caused trouble. But the abuse she was suffering at the officer's house could not be said to be without reason. The officer's mother's way of thinking was normal. If she wanted to lament, she should lament the world. As powerful and knowledgeable as Faust was, wasn't his heart also filled with regret and helplessness? Faust hid his figure and was sighing. A servant walked into the backyard and threw another bedsheet into the wooden tub. He shouted at McGanley, "Why are you washing so slowly? It's almost dinner, and the work in the kitchen hasn't been done yet. This is not the comfortable life you had in the brothel, where you could make a living by selling your smile. Be more diligent." McGanley did not speak. She silently soaked the bedsheet in the cold water and continued to scrub the pile of clothes. Suddenly, a drop of something warm fell on her cracked hand. It turned out that she was silently crying. McGanley raised her arm to wipe the corner of her eyes with her sleeve, but her movements suddenly froze. She stared blankly ahead with her mouth agape, because Faust had revealed himself. A man suddenly appeared in the yard like a ghost. McGanley was frightened, but when she saw the man's face clearly, she was stunned. Faust used spatial magic to cover his voice and said softly, "McGanley, don't be afraid. I've come especially to see you. Do you still remember me?" The girl finally shouted, "Lord Sage Imperial Tutor, you are Sage Imperial Tutor Faust. Who in the Empire doesn't know you? I once saw your face from afar during the sacrificial ceremony. Even in my dreams, I didn't expect you to appear in front of me. Could it be that you have heard my prayers and calls to the gods? You must have heard them. People say that you are the emissary sent by the gods to the human world, that you possess omnipotent miracles. Lord Sage Imperial Tutor, did the gods hear my calls and let you appear here?" Faust's appearance had already changed. McGanley didn't know that the Faust in front of her was the one who brought her misfortune in the past. She didn't even dare to think about it. But she knew the Faust of today. She had seen the most charming man in the Empire during the sacrificial ceremony. Faust was always the center of attention in any sacrificial ceremony. People made him more and more miraculous. Faust felt somewhat sorrowful. He asked in a pleasant tone, "What kind of prayers and calls did you send to the gods during the Empire's sacrificial ceremony? You should have been standing very far away from me, only able to see me from the plaza the moment I walked out of the shrine. How could you remember my appearance so clearly and be so certain with a single glance?" In front of Faust, McGanley didn't know why she completely opened up her heart and was willing to reveal the secrets in her heart. She stood up in a somewhat flustered manner and wiped her hands on her apron. She took a few steps back and knelt on the ground. She bowed and said, "In front of you and the gods, I dare not hide anything. A few years ago, I was a prostitute in the city of Niwei. There was a guest who liked me and asked me to accompany him every day. However, I angered another guest, the son of the current family's mistress. He is a general." McGanley simply narrated what happened in the past. In the end, she explained in fear and trepidation, "I once heard people mention that the missing guest looked a bit like you, Sage Imperial Tutor. I was also very curious. 2 years ago, I had the opportunity to see you from afar during the sacrificial ceremony of the Empire. Since then, whenever I have the opportunity to go out and participate in the various sacrificial ceremonies of the Empire, I would look at you from afar. That's why I remember your appearance very clearly. I confess all of this to you. Please forgive my offense and blasphemy. I only came out of curiosity." Faust asked again, "I'm already in front of you. Please take a good look at me. I am that person." The girl lowered her head and didn't dare to look directly at him. She prostrated on the ground and said with a trembling voice, "Sage Imperial Tutor, the omniscient gods must have sensed the disrespect in my heart. Are you here to punish me? I have indeed blasphemed you. How can I forgive my sins?" Faust sighed in his heart. He didn't expect that when he met McGanley again, she would recognize him as Sage Imperial Tutor Faust, even though she already didn't recognize him. Faust wanted to tell McGanley that he was that person back then, but he didn't say it. Even if he said it, the girl wouldn't dare to believe him. Instead, she would be scared to death. He wanted to repent and beg for forgiveness, but he didn't have the courage to say everything. Perhaps there was no need to say anything. He was only thinking about how to make it up to this girl and redeem his own mistakes. Faust waved his hand, and an invisible force that was like a gentle embrace helped the girl up from the ground. He said softly, "Maganlei, I'm not here to punish you. You didn't do anything wrong either. It was the gods who heard your call. They sent me to help you and fulfill your wish. Please say your prayer to the gods in front of me." Maganlei's eyes revealed an almost crazed surprise. She clutched her chest and cried out in surprise. "Is this true? Great gods! The great Enril!" Faust's legs almost gave way. He almost lost his balance. This girl was still praising Enril in front of him, but he couldn't say anything. He could only perform a divine prayer to appease the girl's soul. He said noncommittally, "Please say your prayer. What wish do you want the gods to help you fulfill?" Maganlei replied excitedly, "My prayer to the gods is that they can forgive my mistakes. If it weren't for me, Hism wouldn't have caused such a disaster and lost his official rank. I hope that the gods will bless Hism to be safe at the front lines and restore his glory. I also hope that Hism's family won't mistreat me again, so that I can live a stable life." Hism was the officer who had been demoted. Faust asked, "Is that all?" Maganlei lowered her head and rubbed her apron anxiously. "I'm already very grateful that the gods can forgive my mistakes. I dare not ask for more." Faust nodded with a look of regret. He stared at Maganlei and said, "What do you mean by living a stable life? Hism once said that he wanted to marry you. Are you waiting for him to return home after he has rendered meritorious service on the battlefield and is reinstated? Please tell me the truth, there's no need to hide anything." Maganlei bit her lip and shook her head as if she had made up her mind. "No, I don't want to marry him, and I can't marry him." Faust asked again, "Oh, why is that? If I'm willing to help, I only need to ask someone to send a message. Hism will obediently marry you, and his family won't dare to disrespect you again." Hism replied in a weak voice, "I don't dare to hide anything in front of the gods. I have no doubt that you can do all this, but it's not what I want or what I can get. If that's the case, Hism won't marry me, but your message. I'm now clear that Hism doesn't really want to marry me. He just needs my money to help him get out of prison and settle his family. It was not without reason that his mother hated me. If it was any other mother, it would be hard for them to not think that way. These are my misfortunes, but I don't know how to get rid of them. So I call on the gods in my heart, but I don't get an answer. Today, I finally see you, the wisest sage imperial tutor in the entire empire. What should I do?" This question stunned Faust. He couldn't answer, just like he had too many wishes he wanted to fulfill, but he didn't know how to do it. With his status and means, there were many ways he could help Maganlei, but these were things that needed to be done by others. Maganlei's question clearly didn't mean that. She was asking Faust, the wisest sage of the empire, what should she do? In fact, with Maganlei's situation, she had already given her all and couldn't do any better. The girl's question seemed to have become Faust's own question. He called out to Shantian in his heart. What should he do in the current Asur Empire? Seeing that Faust was deep in thought, Maganlei carefully asked after a while, "Sage of the Empire, can you tell me?" Faust returned to his senses and took out a small bottle from thin air. He handed it to her and said, "This is a miraculous medicine. Apply a little before you go to bed every day. Within a few days, the wound on your hand will be healed. It will also make your hand more sensitive and your joints more flexible. If you want to know the answer, then try to do something first. Find an opportunity to tell the matriarch that you know how to knit and embroider. You can make a lot of money by processing the clothing and embroidery that the nobles like the most." Maganlei was puzzled. "I know how to knit and embroider, but I can't do it that well." Faust smiled. "I will find a way to teach you. I will imprint the skill into your soul. As long as you are diligent enough and skilled enough, you will be able to do it." Megan tears. "Thank you for helping me in this way, so that I can do more myself. I can do more. But I know the temper of the matriarch. If I can really do it, she will urge me to make more embroidery day and night. It is nothing more than a form of abuse to another form of abuse." Faust reminded her. "That depends on what you do. The skill is in your hands, and you must know how to use its value to improve your situation. For example, you can announce how much you can only embroider in a day, and that you need to rest well. If all of this is important to your matriarch, then you will naturally be able to improve your situation. But this, McGanley wanted to say something but stopped. She felt that there was something wrong with the method Faust taught her, but she couldn't tell what the problem was. She immediately bowed and said, "Thank you for your help, thank you for your guidance. You will hear my voice and know what to do. This way, at least you will have the opportunity to go out more often. I will see you again." When McGanley heard the voice and raised her head again, Faust had already disappeared. In her hand was an exquisite medicine bottle, showing that everything that had just happened had really happened. McGanley did as Faust said. She didn't know what method Faust used, but that bottle of medicine was truly miraculous. After the wounds on her hands healed, she became even more dexterous than before, and there seemed to be a voice in her soul that taught her superb knitting and embroidery skills. Finally, one day, she told Hism's mother about her skills. At first, the old woman scolded McGanley for being whimsical, but when she heard that her skills could make a lot of money, she was tempted and allowed McGanley to give it a try. However, McGanley had to remove all the materials herself from the shop, and she had to sell the embroidery in the shop herself. There was a voice in her soul that told McGanley to go to a shop in Nive to remove the materials, and what kind of embroidery the shop would have her work done and pay her. Faust arranged such a small matter easily. He originally thought that even if he had to spend a lot of money to help the girl in secret, he would do something that would make her feel more useful. But what happened next was beyond his expectations. Faust naturally taught McGanley the most brilliant skill, and the ornaments she embroidered were practically the most exquisite in Nive. They were loved by noble customers, and every piece was worth a lot of money. The shop did not have to worry about not being able to sell, and even accepted special commissions from McGanley. In other words, there was no need for Faust to do much, and McGanley could rely on her skills to make enough money. To the rich, this amount of money wasn't much, but the money that McGanley earned from her craftsmanship was enough for an ordinary family to live comfortably. Therefore, McGanley didn't have to do heavy work day and night. As for knitting and embroidery, Hism's mother naturally wanted her to do as much as possible. Sisimi's mother naturally wanted her to make as many as possible, preferably day and night. But McGanley answered according to what Faust had taught her. These are all custom-made ornaments by the lords of the clan. If they are accidentally damaged, we will have to pay a lot of money. I must rest well before I can finish them. McGanley's situation in Hisham's house was much better than before, but she still did not have a good time. Every day, apart from resting and eating, she had to work on one fine piece of embroidery after another at the old lady's urging. But the kind girl still prayed devoutly every night, expressing her gratitude to the gods and Faust. One night, the girl heard Faust's voice again. "You don't owe this family anything, and you have given them everything you can. Why don't you leave?" McGanley replied, "I have no home. Where can I go if I leave? With your current skills, you can definitely support yourself. You can work on as many embroidery as you want every day, and then do what you want to do." McGanley was silent. She was obviously moved, but also worried. Finally, she sighed and replied, "I can't do that yet. I promised Hism to take good care of his mother. This is my promise. Even if I want to leave this house, I will have to wait until he comes back. Because of me, he lost his position, which means he lost his generous salary. It will be difficult to maintain the family's life as before. When he regains his position, everything will be like before, and I will have made up for my mistake." Faust advised again. "What happened back then was not your fault. Hism drew his sword and caused trouble because of his impulsiveness, anger, jealousy, arrogance. Why do you blame everything on yourself?" The girl thought silently, but still replied, "What you said is reasonable, but I have already promised. Although I will not marry him, I will wait until he comes back, and then I will follow your advice and leave this place." The dignified sage Faust, who had so many military and national affairs to deal with, spent so much time and effort on Maganlii. It was more or less because of a kind of atonement and compensation. This girl symbolized the secret in his heart, the secret of the empire's chief high priest, who was revered by the people. It was like the brand of Satan lurking in his heart. Faust had many ways to help Maganlii, but only according to her own wishes. This was also a kind of self-compensation and redemption. He wanted to let Maganlii find happiness in life step by step, but before he could make more arrangements, the outbreak of war made him busy. First, the kingdom of Potsdam annexed Elam, a weak kingdom to the north of Assyria. Then, Hittite and Assyria joined forces to repel Cyrus' attack on the northern front. Then Cyrus, the king of Potsdam, sent Supreme General Darius to attack the 6 city-states ceded to the Assyrian Empire from the south. The Assyrian Empire was defeated, and all the territory it had expanded during the Cynic era was lost. The army of Potsdam established a new province, cutting off the connection between Assyria and Babylon, and then annexed the Hittite kingdom, completely surrounding the plains of Duk and the Assyrian Empire in its territory. Although the war had not spread to Assyria itself, anyone with a discerning eye could see that the fate of the empire was in danger. What made Faust speechless was that the more setbacks the Assyrian Empire suffered on the front lines, the more important his position in the empire became. The people saw this seemingly omniscient and omnipotent sage as the last hope to save the fate of the empire. Empress Samir, who was at her wits' end, became more and more dependent on Faust, asking him for advice on everything. Faust had never been so strong after receiving the power of Sudan, but facing the situation the Assyrian Empire was in, he had never felt so weak. He had no way to save the Assyrian Empire, but his knowledge and wisdom allowed him to see the situation more clearly than anyone else. Knowing that there was no way to save the Assyrian Empire, but he still made all his efforts in vain. Accepting the praises of the people every day, looking at the fervent expectations in the eyes of the people, Faust's mood could be imagined. He felt very tired, not because his body and energy could not take it, but because there was a sense of helplessness in his soul. The most charismatic man in the empire was once again willing to indulge himself in the depths of his heart, even if it was just for a moment to escape, to find a trace of comfort. He once again took possession of Maganlii. Yes, he was the one who seduced her. Not to mention how irresistible Faust's charm was now, he was like a god in her heart that she could not refuse, and she was more than willing to obey his will. Chapter 281. When Faust took her, Maganlii's whole body trembled. She never dreamed that the sage imperial tutor would do such a thing, but he did. She was willing from the bottom of her heart. Maganlii even felt a sense of sacrifice. She was willing to make Faust happy. One day she asked Faust, "There are more and more rumors in the capital, but the news from the front lines is getting less and less. Is the empire in a difficult situation? Perhaps I shouldn't ask you, but I always feel that there is a layer of worry in your eyes." Faust caressed her soft body and said, "Yes, the empire is in a difficult situation. People place their hopes on me, but I don't know how to face their gazes. Only with you can I feel relaxed, as if I don't have to think about anything for a while. Life is short, why not let us find happiness together?" Maganlii hugged him, and answered the question with her body. Faust felt that he had fallen, and he tempted Maganlii to fall with him. This made him feel even more conflicted, but he was also addicted to it. Maganlii often went out to meet with Faust, and every time she returned home, her face would have a strange blush. As the days passed, the girl also became a charming young woman, but she still maintained her youthful charm. It was like a miracle. This caused the neighbors to talk about it, and gradually, there were rumors that Maganlii had a man outside. Hisham's family vaguely heard some rumors, but before they had time to investigate, the bad news came. Hisham had been killed on the battlefield. The news was brought back by wounded soldiers who had withdrawn from the front lines. The Assur Empire had lost 6 newly conquered towns in the south, and the situation at the front lines was very chaotic. The official news and compensation from the imperial military had not been sent to Hisham's family, but his comrades who had returned to Nineveh told his family that Hisham had died in battle. Maganlii was very sad, but at the same time, There was a trace of inexplicable relief in her heart. She was finally free. Now that Hisham was dead, she could go meet with Faust without any more burdens. She told this news to Faust, and asked him to give her a bottle of magic medicine, because Hisham's mother was very sick. The old lady who had mistreated Maganle fell ill after hearing about her son's death. No doctor could save her life. Faust had given Maganle a bottle of a very powerful medicine, which not only quickly healed the cut on her hand, but also made her hand more nimble. In Maganle's heart, Faust was like a god, and there must be a medicine that could save the old lady's life. However, Faust told Maganle that there was no divine medicine in this world that could make mortals not die. The old lady was old, and her body and mind had suffered heavy injuries. Her life was about to be extinguished, and no one could save her. Even the gods were powerless. Megan begged Faust with tears in her eyes. Even if she could not save the old lady's life in the end, she did not want to see her in so much pain as she waited for death to come. There must be a medicine that could make the old lady feel comfortable and forget her pain. Faust thought for a while, and told Maganle to come back in 2 days. 2 days later, Faust gave Maganle a bottle of medicine and a small spoon, and specially warned her, "According to your request, this is the most effective medicine in the world. It can make the body comfortable and not feel pain. However, it cannot cure the old lady's illness. It can only make her feel no pain until death comes. You must make it clear that she can only take it once a day, and only 1 spoon at a time, otherwise it will be harmful." Faust was, of course, the best potion master in the Asur Empire. He gave Maganle a strong analgesic, and at the same time, it had the magical effect of anesthesia and soothing the soul, and could even stimulate the potential of a person's life. However, it must not be taken in excess, otherwise it would cause an illusory pleasure. And not only was it easy to become addicted, it could also endanger one's life. The method of making this medicine was a secret of the temple, and it was very precious. Usually, only noble generals with high status on the battlefield would carry it with them. It could make a warrior forget the pain in battle, and temporarily release the greatest potential, temporarily unleashing his greatest potential. If he was seriously injured, this painkiller could save his life at a critical moment. The bottle in Maganle's hand was personally made by Faust, so it was naturally the best. When Maganle returned with the medicine, Faust said again, "Since Hisham is dead, you are also free. Now that you are free, leave that family. You don't owe them anything. If you are still worried about other things, I can order for Hisham to be posthumously awarded the title of nobility, and give his family a generous pension." Maganle snuggled in Faust's arms, almost speechless with gratitude. Finally, she raised her head and said, "I am willing to give everything for you, as long as you are happy. But after I leave Hisham's house, where can I go?" Faust replied, "I bought this house for you. With your craftsmanship, you can definitely support yourself and live a good life. Isn't this what you want?" "Unfortunately, I'm very busy these days, and I'm afraid I won't be able to see you for a while." Maganle placed her hand on his chest and said, "Sage, you are not only my god but also the hope of the entire Asur Empire. Although I don't know much about national affairs, there are so many wounded soldiers returning from the front lines, and the atmosphere in Nineveh is getting more and more tense. The whole empire must be in danger. Please don't delay national affairs because of me. I'm very grateful that you gave the order to compensate Hisham's family, but if the Asur Empire no longer exists, such an order will be meaningless." The Asur Empire was indeed in danger. The territory that Emperor Shinnok had expanded had been taken away, and the remnants of the front lines had retreated. The new nobles who had once migrated had now returned. How to accept and settle this group of people was the biggest headache for Asur at present. If it was not handled well, there would be chaos. Samir sent Faust to the front lines to reorganize the remnants of the army, accept, pacify, and deal with the refugees who had returned to the country. Only the sage could do this well. Faust was busy at the border for many days, and finally managed to deal with the situation. Samir urgently summoned him back to the capital to discuss something important. Faust then rushed back from the border to Nineveh to see the women. The years had made Samir more mature, But her charm was still there. She had a special temperament that had always attracted Faust. No matter what situation she was in, she seemed to be so strong. But Faust knew very well how much patience and helplessness this seemingly resolute supreme warrior had experienced. Thinking back to the time when she was unwilling to marry Shinnok, but she still married him. She may not have wanted to become an empress, but she still ascended to the throne. Now that the Asur Empire was in a precarious situation, Faust hoped that Samir could show him the soft side of her heart, so that he could cherish and comfort her. But Samir's expression was still so calm and composed. Since Shinnok's death, the Empress had never shown any warmth, even when they were talking about critical matters. Samir first expressed her condolences to Faust for his recent hard work, and then casually mentioned, "I heard that you spoke to the military and generously compensated an officer named Hizam and conferred a posthumous title on him." Faust replied with some surprise, "Your Majesty is actually concerned about such a small matter? Is there something wrong with my handling?" Samir shook his head and said, "There is nothing wrong with it. The soldiers who sacrificed themselves for the country should be given good treatment. Not to mention the people you care about, Lord Imperial Tutor. Compensating one person is easy, but there are so many dead and wounded soldiers. The families of the dead need compensation, and the wounded need treatment and care. At present, the treasury is empty, and there is not enough. Does Lord Imperial Tutor have any way to solve this urgent problem?" Faust frowned and said, "We have lost the property and taxes of 6 cities, and there are so many wounded soldiers that need to be settled, and so many families that need compensation. Taking out such a large sum of money at once is beyond the financial capacity of the empire. But there is no other way. At present, there is only one way. Perhaps we can try." Faust's suggestion was to recoin. The Asur Empire would issue a new currency to replace the parangons and gold that could be used in all the countries of the continent, and then compensate the soldiers in the form of imperial currency. This could temporarily tide over the crisis. Samir frowned and asked, "Will this really work?" Faust replied, "It will definitely work. It can temporarily solve the financial crisis, but the consequences may be very serious, and it will cause prices to skyrocket. Money has to buy things in order to have value. If the Asur Empire cannot regain its prosperity, what we are doing today is no more than giving a sick person a dose of anesthetic and painkiller, and it is harmful to the body." Samir sighed. "But even knowing this, we still have to do it. Just like that patient, if he does not take this dose of medicine, he will immediately die from the pain. If he takes this medicine, although it is harmful, there will be other ways to treat him in the future. Lord Imperial Tutor, how can we eliminate the consequences of doing this in the future?" Faust muttered, "If the Asur Empire can regain its strength, increase its production and prosper, it will naturally be able to digest the disaster." Samir looked straight into his eyes and asked, "Lord Imperial Tutor, the most knowledgeable person in the entire empire, wisest man, do you think the Assyrian Empire can wait for that day?" Faust was silent, not daring to meet the Empress's gaze. He lowered his head for a long time before replying, "If the Asur Empire does not exist, will your Majesty still need to consider so many problems? We can only solve the problem in front of us first, and there may be a turning point in the future." When he said these words, Faust's heart was filled with pain and helplessness. His life's ambition was to use his knowledge to bring prosperity to the Asur Empire. In the process, he would also achieve his ideals and pursuits. But now the prescription he prescribed for the financial crisis of the Asur Empire was a poisonous and bitter medicine. Although it could temporarily maintain the empire's operations, it would bring suffering to the people. To be honest, this suffering was not caused by Faust, nor was it caused by the prescription he prescribed. It was the inevitable consequence of the Asur Empire's defeat and decline. Faust was only trying to maintain the financial crisis of the empire, and gave a patient a dose of anesthetic to temporarily relieve the pain. He knew the cause and effect of everything, but that was the only thing he could do. Samir's voice was full of regret, and she asked again, "Faust, even you are feeling despair. Are you going to give up?" This was the first time she called him by his name. Faust shuddered and raised his head. No, I am not willing to give up. As long as your majesty is still alive, I will do everything I can. Samir, you should know my heart. The fiery love I have for you has never been extinguished. Everything I do is not only for the empire, but also for you. He also called Samir by his name, finally expressing the love in his heart. Samir was slightly moved, but she quickly regained her composure. She lowered her eyes and said, Lord Imperial Tutor, I have always known what you are thinking, but please don't say anything more. I respect and thank you, but I don't have the feelings you are looking for in my heart. After Seneca's death, I inherited the throne, but I have to watch the country fall in my hands. Is this the punishment of the gods? Faust could not help but stand up and take a step forward. Do you want to give up the throne? Forgive me for being bold, but I can see that you are not willing to sit on this throne. If you hand over the throne to Seneca's son, I am willing. What is he willing to do? Before he could finish, Samir waved her hand and interrupted him. She regained the majesty of an emperor and said resolutely, I will not give up the throne at this time and let someone else be the ruler of a fallen country. I will do everything I can to save Assyria, even if it is beyond saving. Lord Imperial Tutor, are you willing to do the same? Not for me, but for yourself. Faust placed his hand on his chest and said, Of course I am willing to work for the prosperity of Assyria. This has always been my vow. Your Majesty, what do you need me to do? Samir looked up at him with an indescribable expression. She slowly replied, I am thinking about something. Perhaps it is the last hope to save Assyria. I will ask for your help when I have thought it through. Oh, there is one more thing I forgot to tell you. Something happened to Hisma's family not long ago. Hisma's mother died from overdosing. The servants accused Hismu of taking in a prostitute named Maganlii. It is said that she poisoned the matriarch's mother to death. Faust was shocked. He did not have the time to ask Samuel how he knew about the case. He blurted out, How is that possible? What happened to Maganlii now? Samuel looked at him and answered unhurriedly, I don't think it's possible either. The sheriff who investigated the case found the medicine she gave to matriarch. It turned out to be the magic medicine that only the honorable noble generals could receive from the temple. But no matter how they interrogated her, Maganlii did not tell them who gave her the medicine. She only said that a miracle happened, and that it was a gift from the gods. Lord Imperial Tutor, what do you think of this case? Faust replied, The medicine is real. The girl would never poison the old lady. It should be the old lady who took the medicine improperly. Your Majesty, you seem to know something about me. I was the one who gave her the medicine. Samir retracted his gaze and nodded. I see. Maganlii is still in prison. Since the Lord Imperial Tutor has said so, she is innocent. You have just returned from the front lines and must be tired. There are still many personal matters to deal with. Please leave. Why did Maganlii refuse to say Faust's name? Because she could not explain why Faust gave her this precious magic medicine. During the war, this kind of medicine was prohibited among the people. It was specially provided by the temple to the high-ranking military generals. She used to be a prostitute. Hisham was convicted of causing trouble for her, and later took her home. Although Hisham did not marry her, in the eyes of others she was undoubtedly Hisham's woman. Even if she was just an abused maid in Hisham's house, she was still Hisham's woman. The sage state teacher Faust, who was revered by tens of thousands of people in the empire, had actually schemed to get close to her and hang out with a woman like her. No matter if she had seduced him or he had seduced her. This was a serious blow to Faust's prestige and reputation. Even if Maganlii said it, no one would dare to believe it. Moreover, Maganlii was full of gratitude to Faust. Why would she hurt his reputation? Faust left the palace and returned to the divine temple. He immediately ordered someone to summon the security officer of Nive city and let Maganlii go. Since Faust had said in front of Queen Samir that the medicine was given by him, there was no need to hide it from the sheriff. However, his explanation was very dignified. In the temple, the sage imperial tutor happened to hear Maganlii's prayer to the gods. The girl prayed to the gods for the mother of a soldier who had died in the war. She hoped that there would be a magical medicine that could soothe the old lady's pain. Faust was moved and gave the girl a bottle of medicine. He told her what to pay attention to when taking the medicine. The girl could not have poisoned the old lady. It was the old lady who broke the taboo when she took the medicine. McGanley was acquitted. In fact, she had already explained to the sheriff that the old lady felt very comfortable after taking the medicine. She did not listen to the sheriff's warning, and secretly took more of the medicine. The more she took, the better it felt. The old lady could not help but take a few spoonfuls every day. In the end, she lost her life. Hism's mother was already so ill that she didn't feel any pain. However, if she took too much, she would die even faster. The sheriff knew that if no one had accused her, he wouldn't have charged McGanley with a crime. There were two main reasons for detaining the girl in prison. One was that Hism's family would not let her go. The other was to find out the origin of the forbidden medicine. As soon as Faust spoke, the sheriff naturally did not dare to say anything else. He could only praise the sage imperial tutor for his compassion and virtue. He then immediately rushed to the prison to release McGanley. Faust felt very sorry. The medicine he gave the girl out of kindness had almost killed her. He also knew why McGanley had insisted on not saying Faust's name during the interrogation. He was filled with gratitude. The poor girl still did not know that Faust was the one who had injured Hism and disappeared. Chapter 282. Samuel was clearly hinting that she already knew what Faust had done. Was this an expression of sincerity or a warning of dissatisfaction? If the Empress really did send experts to investigate Faust's whereabouts, what was the reason? Did she care about him, value him, or guard against him? But if Samuel was hostile, she wouldn't say it out loud. Could it be a kind reminder? In the current situation, Faust's reputation and reputation were very important to the people of Assur. The Empress didn't want him to cause any scandal, right? That should be the case. This was the most reasonable explanation. Based on absolute reason, Faust shouldn't have gone to see McGanley at this time, but he couldn't help it. Faust knew that McGanley couldn't return to Hism's house after being released from prison. She could only go to the courtyard where they had their rendezvous. So, under the afterglow of the setting sun, Faust disguised himself and quietly left the shrine. After going through so many days in prison, how was McGanley doing? He should comfort her and apologize to her. In a sense, it was him and his identity that brought her this disaster, as he suspected that Empress Samir had sent a master to spy on him. Faust carefully paid attention to the passers-by around him. He disguised his face and activated detection magic to observe his surroundings at all times. He believed that no one in the Empire could follow him without being detected. He didn't find anyone following him along the way. Even if there was, the most outstanding archmage in the Empire had plenty of ways to shake them off. The timing of his visit was very coincidental. McGanley had just been released, and was rushing to the courtyard where she and Faust often met. That was the only place she could go from now on. Faust walked past a shop, turned a corner and entered a secluded alley, just in time to see McGanley's back from afar. McGanley was wearing tattered clothes, and there were a few dried leaves stuck to her hair. She stretched out her hand to open the door. At that moment, a person suddenly rushed out from the opposite corner and shouted at McGanley, "You shameless whore, I'll make you pay with your life." Faust had met this person many years ago. Back then he was a handsome young officer. But now his figure was visibly plump, and he had a messy beard. He wore tight clothes and a short sword hung from his waist. This was Hism, who had been wounded by Faust. Why wasn't Heim dead, and why was he here? In fact, Hism's family had not received any official notification from the Assyrian military. They had only heard from the wounded soldiers who had returned from the battlefield that Hism had been killed. He fell off his horse in the chaos and fell into the enemy's formation. Everyone thought he was dead. When the army was defeated, everything was in chaos. No one expected him to escape from death. Faust had sent word to Hism's family and conferred a posthumous title on him, but the man did not die. This misunderstanding was a little shocking. Perhaps it was because of this that the military or Empress Samir paid attention to it. As soon as Haim returned to Nineveh, he heard the bad news about his mother. His family told him that Megan Lay had given his sick mother a poisonous medicine. Haim couldn't believe this was true. Why would Megan Lay do such a thing? Another kind-hearted neighbor told him about the recent rumors that Megan Lay had a lover outside and often went out to play with him. It must be that man who ordered Megan Lay to poison Haim's mother. She wanted to take revenge for her mistreatment and elope with that man. Because everyone thought that Haim was dead, if his mother had also died, the servants of the family would have scattered to find a way out. The grief-stricken Haim immediately rushed to the magistrate's office to inquire about the case. But as soon as he saw the officer, before he could ask about the details of the interrogation, he heard that Megan Lay had been acquitted. Haim immediately rushed to the prison to find Megan Lay. He wanted to kill her with his own hands. If he still had some affection for Megan Lay in the past, now he hated her to the bone. From Haim's point of view, it was because of her that he had drawn his sword in anger and almost ended up in prison. It was also because of her that he had saved her from the fire pit of a brothel and brought her home. He had even said that he would marry her. But Megan Lay had bitten the hand that fed her. Not only had she seduced a man outside, but she had also been incited by that man to kill his mother. By the time he returned from the battlefield, his family had already been destroyed. Grief and resentment had drowned Haim's reason. He wanted to find Megan Lay to settle the score and find that man. He wanted to make the adulterous couple pay for what they had done. In his anger, Haim still retained a trace of sobriety. He knew that after Megan Lay was released from prison, it would be impossible for her to return to her original home. If she wanted to find a place to stay, it would be to find that man. This was the clue he was looking for. With a sharp blade hanging on his waist, Haim quietly followed Megan Lay from the entrance of the prison to this secluded alley. He finally knew her destination. This should be the man's home. When Megan Lay was about to open the door, Haim finally couldn't bear it and rushed out. He wanted to grab Megan Lay on the spot, kick the door open, and interrogate this adulterous couple. He couldn't let either of them go. Never in his wildest dreams would he have imagined that Faust would appear at the other end of the alley and cast a detection magic. Faust saw Haim fiercely rushing towards Megan Lay and couldn't help but panic. The distance was too far, and Megan Lay was between him and Haim. Faust was afraid of hurting Megan Lay by accident, so he used the simplest method. He cast air element magic from a distance, and an invisible force wrapped around Haim's figure like a whirlwind, sweeping him away. Get out! Fortunately, it was Faust. If it had been anyone else, they would not have been able to stop Haim in time. Faust knew that Haim was a 6th-level warrior, and it had happened suddenly, so he used a lot of force. Haim didn't even have time to pull out his sword before he was sent flying. The back of his head hit the corner of the alley, and he fell to the ground without a sound. Megan Lay didn't see Faust at the other end of the alley. She screamed in horror when Haim rushed over and suddenly flew away. Faust was about to go over when he suddenly noticed a large group of people coming from the other end of the alley. A voice shouted, "What happened? Who is that on the ground? Why is he carrying a sharp weapon in the capital?" Hearing this voice, Faust was shocked. It was the captain of the palace guards, the supreme warrior Krips. Recently, because of the defeat at the front line, rumors were flying everywhere in Nive, and with so many defeated soldiers returning, the security of the capital was very tense. Samir had sent the palace guards to cooperate with the garrison to strengthen the patrolling force. Krips was also one of the main generals in charge of patrolling the city. How could it be so coincidental that Krips led his guards to patrol the city? If it had been an ordinary guard, Faust would have been able to settle the matter here without leaving a trace. But with Krips present, Faust couldn't do so. If he openly showed up and went all out, of course Krips wouldn't be Faust's match. But Faust had come in disguise, and it was impossible for him to cover up what had just happened without revealing his identity. For example, he could knock out all the patrolling soldiers and take away Megan Lay, or get rid of Haim without leaving a trace. It all happened so suddenly that Faust didn't have time to react. Attacking a city patrol in the capital was a crime of rebellion. If Faust really did make a move against the Krips, then even the entire street would be torn down. It was impossible for such a huge commotion to not expose his identity. Faust had another option, and that was to reveal his identity and explain to Krips what had just happened. But he hesitated. Why would the dignified chief high priest of the empire come here in disguise? What was going on between him and this girl? And why would Faust make a move on Heim? No matter how hard Faust tried, he would not be able to explain it clearly. If everything was made clear, it would be the most absurd scandal in the imperial capital. It would greatly damage the reputation of the sage imperial tutor, and it would even affect the prestige of the imperial shrine. While Faust was hesitating, Krips had already rushed into the alley with a group of guards. Someone bent down to check on Heim's situation, and Krips was already shouting at Megan Lay. Just at this moment, a melodious bell suddenly rang out from the direction of the palace. The rhythm was very special and very concentrated, and it rang many times in a row. A patrolling guard asked Krips, "My lord, what's with this bell?" Krips replied, "That's the signal for His Imperial Majesty to summon all the important ministers of the capital to the palace. It seems that something big is about to happen, or that His Imperial Majesty has an important order to issue. Our duty is to patrol the city. Continue to patrol the city and don't make any mistakes. Everyone be extra vigilant." Faust hid himself and glanced at the alley. Finally, he stomped his feet and turned to rush to the palace. The signal from the bell was very urgent. There must be an important military matter, but it had to happen at this time. The bell gave the hesitant Faust the best reason and excuse. He didn't leave on purpose, but he had to leave because of the bell's summoning. History seemed to have gone through another cycle. Back then, Faust had quietly left after injuring someone in a brothel. No one knew his identity, and no one could trace the whereabouts of the assailant. All that was left was the lonely and helpless Megan Lay. But today he had sent Heim flying and smashing him into a corner. Just then, the patrolling guards had arrived, and Faust had quietly left again. It was already dusk, and the sky was gradually darkening. The city of Nineveh was lit up with specks of light. All the ministers of the imperial capital, who were above the rank of deputy head, had already rushed to the great hall of the imperial palace. Everyone was asking what had happened, but no one knew. Seeing that Faust had arrived, everyone asked the sage imperial tutor, but Faust was also confused. At this time, Samir finally entered the hall, surrounded by the servants. She ascended the throne and specially gave Faust a seat to the left of the Empress throne. Empress Samir announced two things. The first was that, under Faust's suggestion, she would issue new coins to solve the urgent financial problems of the empire. The second matter shocked all the officials. Empress Samir ordered Seneca's son to oversee the country, and appointed Faust as the regent. As for the Empress herself, she had to leave the royal capital to personally patrol the borders and reorganize the army. Now that Hittite had been destroyed, and the Assur Empire was surrounded by pots, the next battle would happen sooner or later. No one knew when Cyrus would attack Assur, but they couldn't just wait for death. They had to be prepared. At this time, Empress Samir would personally patrol the borders and reorganize the defeated legions. This was the last resort to boost morale and save face. Samir would personally go to the borders, leaving Seneca's son to oversee the country, and appointing Faust as the regent. This was also a precautionary measure. If anything happened to Samir, the country's affairs would be handed over to Faust, and Faust would help the new emperor succeed the throne. With the current situation, if Samir wasn't around, Faust might even usurp the throne. But if Faust's actions were meaningless, Samuel was not worried about it. If something happened to the empress, and the Assur Empire was about to be destroyed, who would be willing to usurp the throne and become the ruler of a fallen country? Just as he ascended the throne, the country would be destroyed. If Faust really had the ability to save the Assur Empire, then even if he usurped the throne, no one would care. Faust's status and glory had reached the peak of his life. The ministers expressed their blessings and praise to Her Majesty, as well as to the sage imperial tutor. In such an important occasion, Faust was a little distracted. He wasn't in the mood to listen to the praises of the ministers, but he kept thinking about Meganlii. He didn't know how she was doing. He even hoped that this court meeting that would decide the fate of the empire would end quickly, so that he could send someone to inquire about McGanley's situation. If there was anything, he could try to solve it privately. In short, he couldn't let her suffer anymore. According to common sense, after Samir gave him such an important appointment, he should stay behind and seek an audience with the Empress to discuss the important arrangements of the country. But Faust didn't do so. After the court meeting ended, he wanted to leave the palace with the ministers, but the eunuch stopped him. Her Majesty wanted to see the sage imperial tutor alone. Faust came to a small hall at the back of the palace. It was already late at night, and Samir ordered all the eunuchs to leave. Only then did he speak faintly. "Faust, are you still the sage imperial tutor I know? Are you still the person that the Asur people admire and love? I want to entrust a country to you, but you didn't even ask after the court meeting ended. You didn't even come to see me alone, and just left in a hurry?" Faust quickly got up and apologized. "Your Majesty, please forgive my mistake. Recently, I have been worrying too much, and it's inevitable that I'm a little absent-minded. When I heard of your Majesty's latest decision, I wanted to hurry back and make arrangements. It's already late at night, and I plan to come back tomorrow morning to see your Majesty." Samir waved his hand. "Please sit down and talk. I know you have something on your mind. But no matter what, don't forget your responsibilities. Just like me, I originally didn't want to ascend the throne, but now that I'm in this position, I have to shoulder my own responsibilities. Faust, are you worried about that girl called McGanley? Faust was taken aback. He had just sat down, but he couldn't help but stand up from his chair. "Your Majesty, how did you know?" Samir threw a scroll over and shook his head. "You don't need to ask anymore. I have already ordered the latest case to be reported to the palace. That man called Hizmu is dead, and McGanley was brought back to the Yamen. She admitted on the spot that she killed him. As for how I know about this, there's no need to hide it now. You are very important to the Empire, so of course I will be concerned about your situation, and am willing to share your worries." Faust opened the scroll and finally understood what had happened after he left. Hizmu was dead. Although Faust didn't want to kill him, he had used too much force in a moment of desperation. The warrior flew out and hit the back of his head against a wall, killing him on the spot. He had managed to escape with his life in the midst of thousands of soldiers and horses, but he didn't expect that as soon as he returned to the imperial capital, he would first learn of his mother's death, and then inexplicably lose his life. While the ministers were discussing in the palace, Cripps brought Hizmu's corpse and McGanley to the Yamen, and called the sheriff to interrogate them overnight. Although McGanley was weak by nature, she wasn't stupid. When she woke up, she also realized what had happened. Faust must have secretly sent Hizmu flying, but because of the arrival of the city guards, he couldn't reveal his identity and left. At that time, the palace bell was ringing urgently to summon the ministers. McGanley didn't say Faust's name. She confessed to Cripps that she had pushed Hizmu, causing him to lose his balance and fall backward, hitting his head against the wall. How could a 6th-level warrior like Hizmu be fatally pushed by a weak woman like McGanley? He had been injured on the battlefield not long ago and had yet to recover, so it was entirely possible. As for why the two of them had a conflict, it was easy to explain. Hizmu's family had accused McGanley of poisoning the matriarch. That bottle of medicine was indeed given by McGanley to his mother, and if taken improperly, it would indeed be life-threatening. When Hizmu returned, he naturally wanted to find McGanley and ask her about it. The sheriff also called in Hizmu's neighbors to question them, but many of them said that McGanley had betrayed Hizmu and had a lover outside. Hizmu went to find McGanley because he wanted to find out who the man was, and that courtyard was probably where McGanley and her lover met. Someone even asked the sheriff why McGanley was acquitted. The sheriff's answer was naturally according to Faust's words. That bottle of medicine was bestowed to McGanley by the sage imperial tutor when she was praying in the temple, and coincidentally heard it. The previous case had already been closed, so there was no need to dwell on it. Today they would only interrogate today's murder case. Today's case had happened in the imperial capital, right under Cripps's nose. Everyone had been alarmed, so they had to be interrogated. In fact, there was nothing to interrogate according to the testimony. McGanley was guilty of murder, not to mention that she had killed a soldier who had narrowly escaped death on the battlefield. Moreover, the Imperial Army had just issued an order that Hizmu would be reinstated. You're tuning in to the Li Mei's Wuxia Whispers YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.